a lovely evening. I'm sitting here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. Life is normal. It's summertime. It went from 8 months of winter. It just couldn't decide to be spring. And then once it finally decided to be spring, it became summer. And yeah, I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. I'm going to talk to you all for a little bit here tonight. Just kind of a relaxed conversation. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Be sure to post this on Reddit, on Facebook, on Twitter. The more people that are here, the more fun that we are going to have. So be sure to spread the word, make this a bigger conversation. More people, the merrier. The way we do things here is I give my opening remarks, and then from there, I do the roll call, where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. We do the roll call, we find out who's watching, and then from there, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. I just answer your super chat questions until I run out of energy, or my voice gives out, or I just run out of super chat questions. So really, it's the super chats that make the second half of the show. My opening remarks are the opening remarks, and tonight they'll be pretty basic. They'll be pretty chill. But then from there, I do the roll call, and then we do the super chat questions. So keep the super chats rolling in. I'll be writing them down with this magical pen on this magical piece of paper, and from there we will answer them. So welcome everybody. Glad you're here. We are a lovely community here. No unnamed diet beverage today, just unnamed water beverage. It's nice. I've got the window open, so if you hear motorcycles going by or honking car horns or sirens, no one's going to die. No one is going to die. It is just part of life. If you're curious what this cord behind me is, it's the light, right? It's the light. That's what it is. I have a light above the bed. That's what it is. So there you go. I'm sitting here, and it'll just be kind of a relaxed stream tonight. Opening remarks, roll call, and super chat questions. Alrighty. All right. Opening remarks begin now. All right, folks. I am going to do something for my opening remarks that I was actually brought up not to do. Folks, I had a mother who was a librarian. My mother was a librarian, and she was very proud of the fact that she raised my brother and I to be literary. And so one thing my mother always urged us not to do is to ever talk about television. My mother did not want us to talk about television. She thought that reflected poorly on her. She was so proud of how bookish she was and how bookish she raised my brother and I to be. But tonight I'm going to do something that is a little bit unnatural for me, and I'm going to talk about television because I do own a television. My wife and I do watch television occasionally. And it's important, I think, for leftists to be able to relate to average people, right? It's for people that are not political activists, for people that are just living their lives. Television is a very big, important part of their lives. And if you're going to be able to relate to people at your job or people on your campus or people in your neighborhood, you're going to have to be able to talk to some degree or other about television. So, yes, I do own a television. My wife watches it way more than I do. We can barely ever agree on something that we both want to watch. And if I want to watch something, I generally find it on YouTube or streaming on the internet and just watch it on my laptop. The TV is kind of my wife's domain. But every so often we do find something we can agree on, and that's going to be the topic of what I tell you about tonight in my opening remarks. Now, to be fair, Israel-China relationship. All right. To be fair, well, one of the reasons, I guess, that it's very hard for my wife and I to find something we can agree on when it's time to watch TV is because one of my wife's favorite things to watch is police shows, cop shows. I cannot stand cop shows, cannot stand police shows, cannot stand them. I cannot stand them because they are so far from reality. Police shows present this alternate universe where the bad guys always get off on technicalities, where the police always have their hands tied by these civil liberties and they can't go after people, where jurors are constantly being convinced by tricky lawyers to acquit people that are guilty of sin. This is not reality. Anyone who's worked with the legal system will tell you that that the whole system is pretty much rigged in favor of the state and of law enforcement. Police murder people all the time, and rarely do they even get charged. All right, siege mentality. Rarely do they ever get charged. Furthermore, juries in the United States almost always convict people. I've told you before that New York City, I live here in New York City, I'm in Brooklyn, but the Bronx, the borough of the Bronx, which is the poorest county in the entire country, the Bronx, has the lowest conviction rate in all of the United States. When people go to trial in the Bronx, in the Bronx, in the poorest county in the United States, they have the lowest rate of conviction. Juries in the Bronx acquit people more than any other county in the United States. And you know what the acquittal rate is in the Bronx? It's 1/3. It's 1/3. So even in a county that is overwhelmingly poor and has the lowest conviction rate in the country, juries still convict people 2 out of 3 times. Furthermore, less than 1% of cases actually go to trial. Less than 1% of cases. Why? Because of the trial penalty and because of the fact that it takes years to finally get a trial. And working class people can't be waiting around for 1 or 2 years wondering if they're going to go to jail for a long time, so they tend to take a plea bargain. Prosecutors play this game where they try to charge you with all kinds of things and threaten you with all kinds of things, and then you make a deal where you plead guilty to something you didn't do, and then you only get one charge and you go to jail for like a year. Instead of 10 years, right? It's this game that they play. So very rarely do people risk going to trial. If a case in the United States goes to trial, decline of religion in the USA, if a case in the United States goes to trial, something is wrong. Something's wrong. It's not a normal case. For example, it could be that it's, in states where they have the 3 strikes law, and for your third conviction, you automatically get 25 years. It could be the person's third strike, and they're going to do anything they can to avoid that third felony conviction, so they go to trial. That's one possibility. It could be the person's very wealthy, and if you are wealthy, you have a pretty good chance of getting acquitted. If you can hire a very, very fancy, expensive, defense team, you can often get acquitted. But other than that, if somebody risks going to trial, the chances are they're probably innocent of the crime because there's no reason. Everything is set up to prevent people from going to trial. So people in the legal system in the United States, they rarely ever go to trial. Rarely do they ever actually go to trial. And the overwhelming majority of cases, they just make a plea bargain. So if somebody goes to trial, there's a very, 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 very good chance they are innocent of the crime, because why in the world would they risk going to trial? Why? I mean, there could be other reasons. Like I said, third strike, they could be very wealthy, etc. But for the most part, if somebody is going to take the risk of going to trial in American criminal courts, they're probably innocent. They are probably innocent of the crime for which they are charged. But yet, the Bronx, which has the lowest the lowest conviction rate of any county in the entire country. No county acquits people as much as the Bronx does. They still convict 2 of 3 people. That's how rigged the legal system is. If someone goes on trial, the overwhelming chances are they're innocent, right? Because why would they risk going to trial? But yet, even in the Bronx, which is, has the lowest conviction rate, 2 out of 3 people who go to trial still get convicted. But if you watch the police shows, you would think that, oh my God, the legal system in the United States, people are raping and murdering and bombing and assassinating people, and then they get up in front of the court and they say, oh, they never read me my Miranda rights. And the judge says, ha! Well, we're going to let him go. Let the rapist and axe murderer go. They didn't read him his Miranda rights. and the cop gets up and he says, but he's a murderer, he's a rapist, he'll get out and do it again. The judge says, overruled. We have civil liberties in America. I don't care if innocent people are killed. You heroic police officer are overruled. No, this is the propaganda. You watch Law and Order, you watch CSI, you watch all of it. It's all just a bunch of malarkey propaganda, right? I mean, the legal system in the United States, you can have situations like I've talked about before when it comes to like police brutality, where the police will like try to stop and frisk Marley Graham in the Bronx. They'll stop and frisk him. He won't want to be stopped and frisked, so he runs away from him. So they just follow him home, come into his apartment, and boom, kill him. You know, yeah. And does anything happen to the police for doing that? No. Well, he ran away from them. So, we have the death penalty in the United States for running away from police officers. I mean, this is the situation, right? We all saw that video of George Floyd, and it's only because the country exploded afterwards with outrage they even bothered to charge the police officer who killed George Floyd. I mean, so this fantasy that we see on cop shows where the cops are always innocent, they always have done the right thing, and they're constantly being overruled by this soft and too forgiving legal system. We have more people in prison in the United States than any other country in the world, not just by numbers, but by population. Give me a break. Give me a break. I mean, it is just such a fantasy, and cop shows make me angry. They make me very, very, very angry. Cop shows really, really make me angry. They really make me angry. And so I can't watch police shows. And that said, look, for goodness sakes, I work in television. I'm not opposed to television, right? I think television has its place, right? But I will say that TV can be mesmerizing to some degree or other. I think it's important to watch TV. I think you should watch the TV network I work for every day, 24/7. But in addition to that, you should also read books. You should listen to classical music. You should go to a play if you have the opportunity to go see a play, a stage play at a high school or a college or a university. Go and see a stage play every so often. There are other ways of gaining information, gaining access to the world. I'm all for watching television, but it's important to be balanced in your approach. And one thing that I have heard from multiple people who have been incarcerated, have been in prison, is that the TV is probably the most important thing in maintaining order in prisons. If they did not have TVs on in jail all the time, there would be prison riots twice a week. That TV kind of holds every prisoner's attention, distracts them, gives them something to think about other than I'm in prison and I hate it. And it's very, very important that having the TV on in prison, which if you ever go to prison, from what I understand, they have the TV on all the time. There is not a moment in prison where that TV is not on, right? That TV is on, and that's a way to keep the prisoners distracted and keep order in the prison. And I've heard multiple things, right? I've heard from people that were in prison who maybe their religion or their politics or whatever, they didn't watch TV, and they said they did nothing but watch TV in prison, and it was hard for them to get used to. I've also heard from people that have worked with prisoners. They've said things like, they would be teaching a class for prisoners. They're working with prisoners, and they'd hear these prisoners talking about people like Joe or Bob or Steve or somebody like that. And they would assume that this was another prisoner, and then they'd find out, no, Joe and Bob and Steve are not other prisoners. And so they would think, well, maybe Joe and Bob or Steve are like people they know on the outside. But after a while, they would find out that Joe and Bob and Steve and these people that prisoners were constantly talking about were television characters, right? And that much of what prisoners do is just enthusiastically follow TV programs. And that's how order is maintained in prisons. So TV has its downside. As much as I love television, I want you to watch TV all the time. I want you to watch, get your news from alternative TV networks. At the same time, let's remember TV does have a bit of a downside, right? Now, the local news is notoriously bad. People always make fun of the local news, the dog bites man, news stories. They'll do news stories on, fun had on roller coaster. fun had on roller coaster? Why, yes, Bob, I'm here out in front of the roller coaster, and people are having fun, and it is amazing. Now, little Johnny, are you having fun today at the roller coaster? Why, yes, I am, Mr. Newsman. Hi, Mom. See, wow, who would have thought little Johnny was having fun at the roller coaster? Back to you, Jane. You know, I mean, they do the local news. Is Bronx, Poorest County. And Kathy Duran, thanks for the chats, learning a lot. I'm glad you like it, Kathy. Yeah, you know, I mean, that's local news, dog bites man, etc. You know, there's that, and, I don't know, so that's television. So, but nowadays, TV has changed a lot. TV has really, really changed a lot. So now it's not just, you know, you're flipping through the channels. It's not just you know, cable news. We now have Netflix. Do folks know, we all know about Netflix. I hope you know what Netflix is. If you don't know what Netflix is, you're way behind, my friend. I feel like I'm behind on popular culture, but if you don't know what Netflix is, you're way further behind than me. We all know what Netflix is, right? There's Netflix and Showtime and all these things where you pull up the TV show and you can start it whenever you want, and it just comes out of the TV at you. And anyhow, so, you know, every so often, my wife and I will discover something on Netflix or Showtime or whatever that we can watch, and both of us can watch it. Not a cop show, because I can't stand cop shows. Not a political thing, because that bores my wife. She's not into all my politics and news and all of that. We can find something that we can agree on. So the other day, my wife and I found a TV show that we were able to watch. It was a Netflix series, and we watched like 4 episodes of it to pass the time, to relax on an evening. My wife and I watched 4 episodes of a Netflix series. We watched 4 episodes of this Netflix series, and I cannot turn off the politics that is rolling in my head all the time. And I watched it, and I was just kind of in awe at the propaganda of this Netflix series we were watching. And see, the thing is, you know, I can't turn it off. I see politics everywhere. I interpret everything in terms of politics. 1/6, really the darkest day in our democracy. Okay, all right. Jan 6, darkest day in democracy. You know, I can't turn off my political analysis. So we watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes of this Netflix mini-series, or this Netflix series, not a mini-series. Apparently there's like 4 seasons of it, called The Good Place. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this Netflix series, The Good Place. Well, I'm not giving it a recommendation. I mean, it was something that my wife and I could agree on, okay? And so we did watch it, but I'm not endorsing it. I wouldn't encourage you to watch it if you want. But it was very, very subtly and maybe a little bit overtly political, and I want to dig into the propaganda of The Good Place. So, there you go. All right, we got a couple super chats here. I really respect what you're doing, Caleb. You bring up a lot of important issues. Thank you, Austin. Fundamentalist religiosity versus spirituality. All right. Fundamentalism versus spirituality. Tolstoy. So this Netflix mini-series called The Good Place, and thank you, John, for your super chat. It's called The Good Place, and it's about the afterlife, right? The premise is that this woman has died, and she wakes up, she's in, you know, the afterlife, and they explain to her that in the afterlife, there is the good place, which is heaven, and there's the bad place, which is hell, and she's in the good place. You know, she's in the good place with all the good people. But the thing is, they have mistaken her for someone else. It turns out they think she's this woman who did all these great, amazing things. She's actually in the wrong place. She's actually somebody who belongs in the bad place, i.e. hell. And that's the premise of the TV program, is that she is a woman who has accidentally landed in heaven, and, you know, she's really supposed to be in hell, and she's not fitting in with all the other people in heaven. And no, I'm not ruining it. You learn all of this in the first episode. So that's the premise of the show. Okay, clever premise. Woman accidentally ends up in heaven, doesn't want to get caught and go to hell, so she's just accidentally in heaven. Clever premise. The politics are there. The politics are absolutely there, and the politics kind of shock me a little bit. This is how not leftists, but liberals, middle-class liberals think. Okay, so first of all right, all the people she's in The Good Place, heaven with, are all people who've done what the writers of the show consider to be good things. Consider to be good things. They're all people who've lived very good and upstanding lives. And what is it that most of these people that she's surrounded by who do quote-unquote good things have done? What is it that they've done? They've fought for human rights in Ukraine. They've fought for the rights of women in Africa. They're all NGO CIA activists. That's basically what it's saying. If you want to be a good person, go work for the big NGO that helps destabilize countries and overthrow governments and mobilize the world against Russia and China in the name of woke liberal politics. That's what good people do. You'd think good people might organize unions, good people might, stand up for the downtrodden. No. Being a good person means you go to Harvard or Yale, you get a degree, and you get a degree, and you get hired, and you get paid six figures to go to the third world and organize people to go out in the streets and break shit and tear shit down and destabilize and overthrow governments. The good people in The Good Place are the people who went to Libya and tried to overthrow and stage the overthrow of Gaddafi. The good people in The Good Place, the people who went to Syria and stirred up a civil war that has killed at least 500,000 people and created ISIS and all of this. I don't think being an NGO activist, being an NGO-cialist, being a CIA shill who goes around destabilizing countries in the name of human rights and all that, I don't think that's my definition of what being a good person is. But according to the authors of the show, all the people that are good on this show are all people who are basically, CIA operatives involved in the NGO, the non-profit industrial complex. That's their definition of a good person. If you watch this show, you're a good person, you go to heaven. If you're a CIA operative who destabilizes countries and tries to create wars and foment unrest and civil wars in developing countries in order to hold back economic development, as long as you do it in this woke language, except outright imperialist expansion. Far-right regime in U.S. Stave off contradictions. All right. Lenin disband the Soviets. All right. Lenin disband the Soviets. All right. Writing them all down. That's in the second half of the show. So that's my first criticism of the show. My second criticism of the show. So they contrast all these really good people who come from wealthy backgrounds and go around, doing NGO work for imperialism. All these people that are like basically white helmets. All these NGO-cialists are supposed to be good people. So they contrast her, the main character. She's considered to be a bad person. She's a selfish person. What does she do for a living? Well, we find out that in her life before she died, she sold medicine, or not medicine. She sold this powder that was supposed to improve people's health to people over the phone. She worked in a call center for a company that sold a powder to elderly folks over the phone, and the powder didn't really have very good medical benefits. That's what she did for a living. This is how the middle-class liberals think, right? See, she worked at a call center. Tell you what, folks, I never sold anybody powder they didn't need like this fictional character did, but I'll confess something. I went to a shitty, horrible college in Ohio. But you know what I did? You know how I paid my bills when I was in college? I raised money for the college. So I'm going to hell, folks. I'm going to the bad place because instead of going around trying to destabilize governments in the third world, I worked at a call center raising money for my shitty college that I hated. And you know what? When I talked to the people on the phone, I didn't say, don't donate money to our shitty college. You hated your time. I didn't say that. No, it was my job over the phone to raise money for my college by making it sound like a spectacular place and making alumni feel nostalgic and all of that. So I'm going to the bad place. I'm going to hell. Another thing that I did when I moved to New York City, I worked. I worked at call centers that sold cable television. I did that, and so I'm going to hell. I worked in fast food, right? I worked in fast food for a while. I prepared food for people. I gave them food that might be fatty and bad. See, working class people have to work for evil corporations sometimes. Did you know that? If you're a working class person, if you are a person from the working class, you often, not often, overwhelmingly, you have to sell your labor to a capitalist. And capitalists are only concerned about their profits and screw over other people in the process. And the message of this show is that working class people who have to work at McDonald's or have to work in call centers or have to work in I don't know what, in fast food, they're bad people because they're selling a bad product. But good people go to Harvard and go to Yale and go to Princeton and go to Stanford, and they get degrees in human rights and international studies, and they go to the third world and destabilize people and foment civil wars in this lofty, progressive language. No, if you're a working class person who has to sell their labor power to survive, who doesn't get to do something they believe in, who doesn't absorb the ideology of empire, and then go around spreading it around the world. If you're just somebody who has to work for one of these evil corporations deemed not to be woke enough, you're a bad person. Can you believe this, right? Can you believe this? This is the mindset. CIA people, good. Woman who sells powder over the phone, bad. Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you this. I talked about this with my good friend on the phone today. And he said, well, it's funny because, if you think about Jeffrey Sachs, you think about the UN, you think about the IMF and the World Bank, this woman is supposedly, she sold a product, she sold some, medicine, or some, powder over the phone that was a bad product she sold to people. The international NGO apparatus, they sell a product around the world called neoliberalism that kills millions of people. Jeffrey Sachs went to the former USSR and he sold them a product called shock therapy economics. And all the NGO-cialists and the World Bank and George Soros and the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Institutes, they were going around selling a product that killed far more people than some stupid powder this woman supposedly sold, sold over the phone to people. Think about it. That's the case, right? On top of that, right? I think you get the point there. The other criticism, and this is, again, she's flashing back to her life. She's remembering bad things she supposedly did. Bad things that she supposedly did. One of them is that, that she's remembering is that a coffee shop in her neighborhood, the guy who owned the coffee shop was being revealed, exposed on the internet as being a sexual predator, right? And there was this video floating around on the internet of this guy who owned the coffee shop, so her boyfriend, husband, whatever, says, let's not shop there anymore. And she doesn't care, so she keeps going and buying coffee at the place of the guy who has been revealed on the internet to be a pervert, a sexual harasser. Well, I'm not for sexual harassment, obviously. But, I'm sorry, how many times have we seen a situation where somebody gets canceled on the internet and it's not true? Right? How many times have we seen that? How many times have we seen instances where there's somebody who a video goes viral about them that looks like one thing and it's actually something else? I mean, how many times, right? There's videos going around about me that say I'm, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. I'm Satan and all of this, and I, they say the opposite about me. But no, like her crime is that her husband or her boyfriend is saying, let's not shop at this coffee place because YouTube, the algorithms, Facebook told me we're supposed to cancel this guy, and she doesn't go along with it because she's selfish, because she just doesn't care. But I think that one should not necessarily believe what is said about people on social media, that there are all kinds of people who get canceled by YouTube, by Twitter, by Facebook, who don't deserve it. For example, there was a video a few months ago, about a couple years ago, actually, of this woman who was a manager at a restaurant, and this, these guys came, and they couldn't, she said, you guys don't look like you have money, so you need to show us that you have money before you can eat here. And so the people filmed her, and they said, oh, that's racist. It looks like, they're saying that because we're black, it looks like we don't have money. Well, it turns out they had been there 2 or 3 times before and not had money and not been able to pay for their food. But of course, they didn't tell you that in the video. So they posted this video. It went viral, and it ruined this woman's life. She got fired from her job at Chipotle. It just ruined her life. Well, it turns out that she had let these people eat for free 2 to 3 other times, and finally, she in order to keep her job, basically had to say to them, look, if you're not going to pay, you can't eat here. And they canceled her for that and destroyed her life. So when I see somebody being canceled on the internet, when I see someone being, oh, this person's no good, I'm careful with it. We don't always know the whole story. But according to this show, that's one of the things you go to hell for. If your YouTube tells you to cancel somebody, you've got to do it. Good people cancel people. Good people boycott people. Good people believe what is on their phone. This video, YouTube had a video of this guy that said he was a pervert, so he must be guilty. And if you disobey the algorithms on your phone, you're going to hell. This is how the liberals think, right? You're a good person if you go around spreading capitalism and imperialism around the world as an NGO activist, right? You're a bad person if you work for an evil corporation and have to sell your labor power to survive. And furthermore, you're a bad person if you don't immediately cancel people and obey and believe exactly what the social media algorithms tell you to believe. This show is exactly what is wrong. Exactly what is wrong with liberals. Not what is wrong with leftism. This isn't socialism. This isn't Marxism. This is liberals. This is how they think. All right. A workers' state made up of councils is a preliminary step to social councils as preliminary to socialism. So this is what's wrong with liberals. And this is a reason that people hate liberals, right? That was one thing that's one reason the show South Park took off. I don't know if folks remember this. In the 90s, I was a kid, I didn't watch it, but I caught up on it, later. But, the show South Park, right? The reason it caught on is that South Park would just love to lampoon, these kind of morally self-righteous, hoity-toity, liberals, right? It just lampooned them. Because people don't appreciate that smugness. People do not appreciate that smugness, right? All these people that want to save Darfur, they couldn't dare protest, to save Iraq while their own government's bombing it. Couldn't dare protest to, save Saudi Arabia, the partner of the United States. But oh boy, they have the courage, the moral, righteous courage to protest a government on the other side of the planet. Enver Hoxha. All right. It's just this, oh, look at me. Look how righteous I am. Look how righteous I am. I can't stand these people. When I was in college, all these people, the Iraq War was going on. I would try to get people to protest the Iraq War. Oh, no, I can't do that. You're against the war, aren't you? Yeah, but I don't want people to think I'm a protester. I can't do that. But then, oh boy, rally to save Darfur, rally against China, all kinds of protests against China when the Olympics were happening in China. Oh my goodness. It's so easy to be a coward and protest against some other government around the world and feel self-righteous while you do it. Oh, look at me. I'm taking a stand. I couldn't possibly stand up to my own government. I couldn't possibly question the ideology I'm being spoon-fed in America. But I can feel superior by I'm well informed about events in Thailand. I'm well informed about events in Myanmar, Burma. Yes, and I'm so morally opposed to the government of Iran. These people are punks and cowards, and that's what the good people are. Punks and cowards, right? People that are too scared to question the ideology of American empire and American imperialism, too scared to stand up against the foreign policy lies of the United States, but working hard to get a place in the NGO machine of American empire. I hate these people. I can't stand the NGO-cialist. I can't stand these self-righteous, pro-imperialist schmucks. I can't stand them. Can't stand them. But that's what a good person is, according to the Good Place. Meanwhile, if you sell your labor to a bad corporation, you work at McDonald's and sell people crap food, if you, work at a place on the phone and raise money for something that's not like the most moral thing ever, you're a bad person. This is how these liberals think. Plus, if your phone tells you to cancel somebody, don't investigate the truth. Don't investigate the truth. Just cancel them. Tell you the truth, folks, I will probably continue watching this show with my wife. People are telling me in the comments that it gets better. I'm in like 3 or 4 episodes into it, and we'll probably keep watching it one of these days. But I'm just telling you, this is how liberals think. This is how the liberal folks think, okay? This is how they think. It's this self-righteousness, this condemning of ordinary people, and this is what good and evil means. This is what good and evil means to the liberal class. And it's obnoxious. It's genuinely obnoxious. It is generally obnoxious. Genuinely obnoxious. I just wanted to share that with people. It's just like cop shows. Basically, this is cop shows. This is like the cop shows are for the lower level capitalists, for the lower level police establishment. This is the cop show for the ultras, for the ultra rich. This is the cop show of the CIA, right? It's the cop show of the CIA, more or less, right? So there you go. That's my reaction to a television program. I'm sure my mother would be horrified if she found me talking. I spent almost 40 minutes on here talking about television. She would be utterly horrified by this. A good librarian does not raise their child to talk about TV in public, but here I am talking about television. And honestly, Marxist ethics, right? Honestly, you should talk about TV. You should talk about TV. You should talk about TV because a lot of people watch TV. A lot of people watch TV, and there's nothing inherently wrong with watching TV, okay? It's what people do, right? I encourage you to watch TV, especially if you watch the network I work for, but I also encourage you to listen to classical music. I also encourage you to exercise. I also encourage you to read books, but TV is important. TV exists, it's a part of our reality. But the TV of the imperialists, the CNN, Fox News universe, not so much. Not a big fan. So that's my opening remarks for tonight. That's all I've got for my opening remarks. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. And now I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Who's with us? Who's with us? We got Raphael in Brazil. We got Cole in Calgary. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Temple City, California. Henderson, Nevada. Montreal. Chaya. Zephyr from Eugene. JT24 in Mississippi. Brian Schaefer in Illinois. West Palm Beach. Branson, Missouri. Cleveland. Anthony Penza. Nashville. Ryan in Oakland. Anthony in Detroit, Michigan, David in China, Los Angeles, Cincinnati, Jenny Lynn, Ismail Lopez in Los Angeles, Joey from Belize, Richie out in Staten Island, California, Abertine 8, Los Angeles, President Jesus, Terre Haute, Indiana, Jared from Virginia, San Diego, California, Old Gringo in Kansas City, Missouri, KCMO. Here in Joshua Tree, says Kinky. South Arlington, Virginia, says Max the Sax. South Carolina, says Daryl Peeler. John in Houston. Tony in Oregon. Me, says Sharon Pitts. Miles from Vancouver, Canada. Sweden, West Palm Beach. Vinicius in Brazil. Daniel from the summit of Mount Tabor in Oregon, the wasteland. Lee County, Florida, says Tyler Woodby. Jordan B. in Tampa, Florida. St. David's in Bermuda. Nate from Sydney, Australia. Adelaide, Australia. Ash from Calgary, Canada. Jacob Maxey is in Lafayette, Louisiana. Good friend of the program, and Jacob Maxey is now a moderator. There we go. Mikey Billings in Montana. San Angelo Solidarity is in the house. Great folks out there in Texas. Mitchell in the Netherlands. Tamara and Dario from Brooklyn. Good folks. Jason Sarna in Vallejo, California. I think I'll make Tamara and Dario, you are now mods. All right. Maryland, Virginia, San Jose. Longwarn, Dallas, Texas. Pomona, California. Lee County, Florida. Tampa Bay, Florida, USA. Herb Bryant. I think you're now a moderator, Herb Bryant. Just making many moderators these days, right? If you're a trusted member of this community and you've been here a while, I'll add you. Lockport, New York. Zach in Minnesota. Longview, Washington. Harold in Naples, Florida. Ukiah, California, Selectima 3. All right. Kieran from San Diego, San Juan, Puerto Rico, New Jersey, Treasure Coast, Florida, Chicago, Kendall in San Diego, Max Hessen in Boston, San Francisco, Please Sus, Northern California, Steve in Southwest Michigan, Seeking Outskirts in the middle of the war zone, LA. All right. Seeking Outskirts, you are now a moderator. Very good. Jenny Lynn, welcome to the Wrench Gang. Taranto, Red Illuminati, who is now also a mod, Red Illuminati. Kolkata, India. San Diego, Asheville, North Carolina. Newcastle, very good. Nassau County, Char Darling, welcome. Good friend of the program. Cherokee Nation. Jared from the United Corporations of America. Chicago Hill. A Better America in Northern Michigan. Who else? Anybody else here? Congrats to the new mods. Geez, you've skipped me twice. I don't know who Geez, you've skipped me twice is, but I think the name is Majufi. Right? So there you go. Majufi. You're not skipped anymore, Majufi. All right. Quintico, Virginia. Yay, I get to purge trolls. Very good. Australia. When someone gets a wrench, an angel gets their wings. Very good. Auckland, New Zealand. Stephen Clearly in Auckland, New Zealand. Majufi says yay. Well, yay to you, Majufi. Yay to you. Very good. Very, very good. Anybody else? Names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you, and then we'll start answering the super chat questions. Bendigo, Australia. Very good. Yes. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Going once. Someone asked if I'm still going on about heaven and hell. No, I'm going on about a TV program about heaven and hell, my friend, which is very inaccurate in its depiction of good folks. I don't know. There's actually an old coal miners song from England from the 1840s. I'll tell you a tale just as true as my life about a mine owner and a poor pitman's wife. Before they were out traveling out on the highway, and the coal miner. Anyway, the song is you can look it up. The mine owner and the pitman's wife, and it's the pitman, that's a coal miner, and a mine owner, and it's an old folk song from England that was popular among coal miners, and basically. The lyrics, it's basically this woman is walking someplace, and a coal mine owner, a wealthy capitalist who owns a coal mine, sees her. And he says, where are you coming from? And she said, oh, I'm just coming from hell. And he says, hell? He says, why were you in hell? And she said, well, I died and I went to hell. And the mine owner says to her, well, why are you coming back? And she says, oh, hell is too crowded. So they're letting all the working class people out of hell to make room for all the capitalists. And he says, really? The capitalists are going to hell? And she says, yes. The capitalists are so much more evil than any working class person that all the capitalists are going to hell. And so the coal mine owner is terrified of this, and so it's like they're turning the poor folks, right? What is it? They're turning the uh, yeah. Yeah, you go look it up. I don't know the lyrics; they're not in front of me. But go listen to the mine owner and the pitman's wife. Which is a English or maybe Scottish folk song about they're turning the poor folks all out of hell, for they need to make room for the rich wicked race. For there is plenty of them that belong in that place. Derry down, 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 derry down. It's a classic working class song about how all the rich people are going to hell, which I think is kind of the theme song, the message of A Christmas Carol, if I'm not mistaken. Charles Dickens, right? Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I think that's kind of the message, right? The Ghost of Christmas Past shows Charles Dickens, Charles Dickens, he's the author, shows Scrooge doing all the cruel things to the poor people. The Ghost of Christmas Present shows how Tiny Tim and his employee is not being paid well and is miserable. And then the Ghost of Christmas Future is he's died and everyone hates him and all of that. And so after seeing the ghosts, by golly, Scrooge, has an awakening and becomes a nice guy, and there you go. Charles Dickens was not a socialist. He was kind of a moralist. He was kind of writing books bemoaning the hardship of the Industrial Revolution era in Britain. He did write an awful book called A Tale of Two Cities that was an attack on the French Revolution. It's just kind of moralizing. It was about the plight of homeless children and the way people were treated and the alienation and the cruelty of people and how human kindness, it's not, it's kind of like Victor Hugo. A lot of people project revolutionary politics onto Les Miserables, right? Victor Hugo, he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he wrote, Les Miserables, and many people look at Les Miserables because we've all seen the Broadway musical of Les Miserables. We've all seen the Broadway musical, right? Do you hear the people sing? That's not what the book is really like. The students in the novel Les Miserables are portrayed as naive. They're naive and idealistic, and they all go out and get killed, and it's not worth it. That's the message. And the point of Les Miserables is that one should just be a humble religious person and, be loyal and religious and do the right thing. And don't be a revolutionary because it just leads to people getting killed. But if people are just moral people and just follow the Bible and follow God, why even evil capitalist French society could get a little better. That's kind of the message, right? Is that as capitalism is emerging in France, people are becoming greedy and selfish and cruel. And there's all this hardship and cruelty in the world. But this one guy, Jean Valjean, who stole a loaf of bread to feed a hungry child, because he's moral and because he follows the Bible and he's a good moral person, everything's going to be okay. It's not anti-capitalist, and it portrays the student uprising. It portrays it as naive and foolish and ultimately pointless and getting people killed. So you think of the Broadway musical that came out in 1969 in the middle of the 60s. You're thinking of a completely different thing, and that's Charles Dickens' message too. Is basically be nice, be a good person, and oddly, that's kind of the message of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? The Muslim Brotherhood maintains that, look, if everyone was just a good Muslim and followed the Quran, you wouldn't need socialism, everything will be fine. And that's, and this is the message of a lot of religious material, is that you don't need socialism, you don't need class struggle, you don't need a new economic system, you just need everyone to follow the Bible and be good people, or follow the religious teaching and be a good person, and everything will work itself out, and that communism, socialism, revolution, these are bad things because they offer heaven on earth and only God can create it. So it's an attempt to create God and heaven on earth without God. So it's the Antichrist. That's kind of the thinking of a lot of religious stuff. And, as much as I am religious and all of that, I certainly don't agree with that. I believe that human beings do have an obligation to try and make the world better. I do think we have an obligation to take history in our hands. All right. Middle class propaganda term. We do have an obligation to take history in our own hands. We do have an obligation to fight for justice. There's an old saying, right? When, basically anyone who's ever been a parent or ever been a teacher, right, is in some cases going to have to implement, rules or to their kids or rules to the students that are genuinely not fair. And the student, the child or the parent will inevitably, face the child, the children, the students will inevitably complain about it. And so what classically is the response? What is the response that authority figures generally give to children who are complaining about situations that are clearly unjust? Is they will say to them, life isn't fair, right? And are they accurate? Yes, they are absolutely accurate in saying that life is not fair. Life is definitely not fair. Look at the world. Life is not fair. But that, in and of itself, does not justify. It's a logical fallacy. It's a logical fallacy, right? I couldn't go rob somebody on the street. I could imagine I went out and robbed somebody tomorrow, right? I go out and rob somebody. And so I'm arrested for this. And the judge says, well, that's not fair. You robbed this poor woman on the street, Caleb, and you stole her money. That's not fair. Could I say to the judge, Judge, life isn't fair? And the judge would look at me and say, oh, he's got a point. Life isn't fair. And he would let me go, I don't think so, right? Life isn't fair. It doesn't genuinely justify things. And that's a certain mindset you get into. Well, life isn't fair. Life isn't fair. Well, of course life isn't fair. Life is definitely not fair, folks. Life is full of injustice, and, we all have to deal with it. There's no question about it, right? Life is definitely unfair. But we all have a moral obligation to try and do the right thing, right? Life not being fair does not cancel out our moral obligation to do the right thing, right? I can't just, go out and, life not being fair does not give me a license to be an immoral person. So, and that's kind of the problem with some of that, right? It's like, well, life isn't fair and everyone should just try to be a good moral person, and, not expect the world to get any better. No, you have to do your best. We have an obligation. We have an obligation, to make the world a better place. But anyway, I've got super chats to answer. So if anyone has any more questions they want me to answer, by all means, just super chat them to me. And we are going to go through these super chat questions. Some of them will get longer answers than others, but I will try to give a good answer to all of them. First one, Israel/China relationship. Well, Israel and China do business with each other. That is true. However, Mao Zedong embraced the Palestinian people, during the 1967 war where the Arab nationalists fought against Israel. China supported the Arab nationalists. China has recognized the Palestinians, has spoken up for the Palestinians in the UN, has criticized Israel in the United Nations, but, China is not boycotting Israel. That is true. China does business in Israel. That is true. So, I'm not telling you that's right or wrong, but you asked me, does China do business with Israel? Yes, they do. Do they boycott Israel? No, they don't. Does China have a history of supporting the Palestinians? Yes, they do. All righty. Next question. Siege mentality. Chaya asked about a siege mentality. I don't know what the context of the question was, but a siege mentality. When people feel they're under siege, they're under attack, how does it change how they see things? One can apply this to the socialist countries of the world. One can also apply this to, ethnic minority communities that feel that they are under attack. Right? There are many ways that one can apply that. UN and imperialism, right? UN and imperialism. There are many ways one can apply that, but a siege mentality. Look, I think a lot of people, working class people, feel a siege mentality during the pandemic when their jobs were on the line, when they lost jobs, when their incomes were in jeopardy. And yes, when people are facing a threat, a real or perceived threat, and they face it, it certainly does change how they perceive the world and perceive world events. There's no question about that. So I don't know if you're referring to socialist countries. I don't know if you're referring to certain communities in the United States, but a siege mentality is certainly something that develops. Siege mentalities happen. And is it possible that with a siege mentality, you can lose your ability to properly process information. You can perceive threats where they don't exist, right? You can become what they call paranoid, right? And see a threat under every rock in cases where such threats don't exist. Sure, a siege mentality can be dangerous. I think it's Bernie Sanders in the Michael Moore movie Fahrenheit 9/11, which is actually not my favorite film. I didn't particularly like it very much. But he says, he believes he's being interviewed by Michael Moore, and he says, you can make people do anything if they're afraid. And that's true. You can make people do anything if they are afraid, right? Fear is the mindset of a rat jumping off of a sinking ship. They do that. Did you know that? Rats jump off of a sinking ship. Now, is that a smart thing to do? Is that a smart thing to do if you are a rat, right? Oh, the ship is sinking. Better jump into the ocean. You're going to die quicker. But they're panicking. Oh my God, the ship is sinking. Better jump. You know, it's not a particularly healthy mindset. And one thing I've noticed, right, and that this is a tactic that is used by people who try to manipulate others, salespeople, con artists and whatever, is they create a sense of urgency, right? I don't know if you've ever been, apartment hunting or trying to look for an apartment, which I have, And when I'm looking for an apartment, every salesperson, every realtor, every apartment person that I work with always says, oh, this is going to go fast. This place is going to go fast. You better sign now. I mean, I can't guarantee it's going to be here tomorrow. And it's bullshit. They just want you to sign the deal right then. And they know you're more likely to do it if you don't have time to shop. Right? Car salesman. All right, well, there's a family that's going to buy this, and I'm going to sell it to them. They're going to get here. This is a tech. You got to decide now. Got to decide now. You got to decide right now. Oh, you don't decide now. That's a way to get people to do things they wouldn't normally do, is by creating kind of a panic mindset. And in politics, we see this. As much as I recognize that climate change is a reality, it's definitely a reality. The climate cult does this, right? Oh, we're all going to die. The earth is going to burst into flames. You got to vote for Joe Biden. You got to vote for the Democrats. Oh my God, earth is going to burst into flames. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. You have to vote for the Democrats because we're all going to die. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. And it's a way of, we don't make any demands on the Democrats. We don't question anything we're being told. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. Right? And during the 1980s, the Democrats did the same thing, except we weren't all going to die from global warming. We were all going to die from nuclear war. Oh my God, if Ronald Reagan wins the election, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. He's going to push the button. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. You have to vote for the Democrats. Don't make any demands on the Democrats. Don't call out the Democrats. Don't demand that. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. Right? And this is hustling, and they do it on the right too. The terrorists are coming. If Bush doesn't win, Al Qaeda is going to come and kill us all. You have to vote for Bush. You vote for him. The Democrats are traitors. They're questioning things. Do you want to get blown up in 9/11? I don't want to get blown up. Vote for the Republicans. You're all going to die. We're all going to die. Vote for the Republicans. Donald Trump. The immigrants are going to come, and they're going to come break into your home, and MS-13 is going to shoot you in the face, so you got to vote for Donald Trump, or else MS-13, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. Vote for Donald Trump, right? This is classic, right? And this is the tragedy of American politics. We're not actually sitting down and trying to find solutions to the problems in the country. Instead, we have multiple nightmares being thrown at us. Donald Trump is like, you are going to die from immigrants and from terrorists and from Al Qaeda, and you are going to die, and so you got to vote for me because I'm Trump. And Joe Biden's like, man, we're all going to die from Trump. He's a neo-Nazi. He's a Ku Klux Klan guy and global warming, and we're all going to die from Trump, man. And it's just like, it's like you don't vote for like policies that'll actually fix up the country. You vote to avoid the apocalypse that comes from the other guy, right? And we're like trading nightmares. There are competing apocalyptic scenarios and nightmares that determine who you're supposed to vote for. And as we know, right, the reason that MS-13 and criminal gangs exist is because immigrant communities are facing a siege mentality. And the more you terrorize immigrant communities, the more ICE raids you have, the more immigrant communities are afraid to cooperate with law enforcement, the more immigrant communities are forced into the shadows, the stronger those criminal groups get. The bigger the walls get along the border, the harder it is to just walk across the border, the more people hire groups like MS-13 to smuggle people across the border. So actually, Trump's ICE raids and anti-immigrant policies strengthen the very organizations he's scaring the crap out of you about, right? You know, the ICE raids, the anti-immigrant policies strengthen MS-13. If they smuggle you across the border, if you can't just walk across, if the immigrant communities are afraid to call the police, those folks show up. And they, you know, the more terrified the immigrant community is, the more terrified they are, the more strong those organizations get. But you can't have that conversation. You just scare people, right? The answer to everything is more police state repression. Did you know that? That solves everything. I mean, the war on drugs. Look, there's no drugs anymore in the United States. No one ever does drugs because we have had SWAT teams kick down doors and we put people in jail for a long time. And as a result, we don't have a drug problem. Ever. I mean, there's no drug problem now because police state repression solves everything. You know, there you go. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, but when you create a panic mentality, when you create a panic mentality, people don't think about these things. All right. Capitalism conforming society more decadent and impoverished fashion. Poorer getting poorer through self-image. What do you say? Or getting poorer through self-image. Decadent. I am going to have to think that one over. I'm not quite sure what you're getting at there. That's okay. All right. Next Super Chat question. All right. Decline of the religion in the USA. I'll tell you what the decline of religion is. All right. And forgive me, you know, religion is a personal matter. It is a personal matter, right? I am a Protestant Christian. That's the tradition I come from. My wife is a Roman Catholic. I work with a lot of people who are Russian Orthodox. I have a lot of Muslim friends. I even spoke on a panel of Shia Muslims at Columbia University a couple years ago. And I have many Muslim friends. I have many Jewish friends who are Reform Jews. And friends who are Orthodox Jews. And so, you know, please, you know, religion is your personal matter. I've got good friends who are atheists. A lot of communist atheists are my friends. A lot of Buddhists are my friends. So, you know, I'm not here, you directly asked me what I think the decline of religion in the United States is. I'm going to tell you what I think it is, but this is not meant to disrespect anyone else. I respect your religious beliefs, and I consider political movements to be separate from religion, right? They're separate, right? In the United States, we have the separation of church and state, right? And religion has no place in American politics. No one should be governing based on their religious beliefs. Right? Your religious beliefs are between you and your faith community and your God, and you should not be making government policy and laws based on religion. Now, that said, I'm asked, why has there been a decline of religion in the USA? Now, that's a hard thing to measure. Now, there's certainly more atheism in the USA than there once was. Part of that is the new atheist movement. Is church attendance low? Yeah, but you have to remember there's been a pandemic where people have not been going for a year because they couldn't go. So, that has certainly had an effect. But yes, prior to the pandemic, was there a decline in church membership in the United States? Yes. Prior to the pandemic, was there more atheism in the U.S., at least publicly, than there used to be? Yes. What's this about? Well, look, I have many times argued that the religious right, which I grew up around, takes everything beautiful out of Christianity. And it boils Christianity down to some heavy emotions. And the mindset that is cultivated by the evangelical Christian right. Right, and I'm not even talking about regular fundamentalists. Fundamental Baptists and people like that. They can talk Bible with you all day long, and they can tell you exactly why they're different than Methodists and Jehovah's Witnesses. But the modern religious right, the mega church movement, right? The mega churches, the churches that have the big movie screen at the front and they play the rock and roll music, and you ask them what they believe, and they say, we just believe the Bible, man. We just believe the Bible. And you say to them, yeah, but what about all the questions people have argued about for years about, should you baptize babies? And they can't give you an answer. Man, we just believe the Bible. We just believe the Bible, man. That mindset is something that a lot of people just can't take it. A lot of people just don't find solace in that view. Joel Osteen, right? Watch Joel Osteen. He's on TV. I bet you can probably watch him 24 hours a day if you have cable. Again, we're talking about television again. Joel Osteen, Pastor Joel Osteen. Hi, I always like to start with a joke. And he starts with this corny joke. And then he gives you a pep talk. Go out and work really hard, and you will make lots of money. I'm Joel Osteen. And he's really, really a good-looking fellow. Women find him very attractive. But what he's preaching has very little to do with Christianity. He is telling you that if you have a good attitude on life, you can be successful in business. And you can be successful at your job, and you can make friends if you keep a good attitude in life. And here are a couple Bible verses that kind of back that up. He's not talking about the crucifixion. He's not talking about the teachings of Jesus and what they mean. He's just giving you this feel-good, self-help, stuff dressed up as Christianity, right? It has nothing to do with Christianity. The other thing is that, many people talk about there are things done in the name of religion that are not good, right? That, a lot of these televangelists, they kind of prey on the elderly. Look, there's a lot of elderly folks who've been abandoned, right? They've just been abandoned. Their families don't go and visit them, and they sit at home all day long, and they're getting older, and they're just kind of sitting inside, and they're sitting at home, and they feel abandoned, and they feel lonely, and so faith and religion becomes very important to them as they're old and they've been abandoned in their home. They're starting to get older, and they're isolated. They're not seeing people. They just kind of got their TV, and they're just sitting there, and the televangelists prey on those people. Let's be real about it. They prey on those people, right? There's a lot of exposés. I don't want to get into specifics about it, but they prey on those folks, right? And those folks that are just kind of stuck, and they're in their house, and they're lonely, and their family has kind of left them behind, and they've been kind of abandoned, and they have a television, and they turn on those pastors, those TV pastors, and those TV pastors want their money, and they send the checks, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking. And people see that, and they see that kind of predatory behavior, and they don't approve, right? They don't approve of that. People don't approve of that kind of behavior, and so that is also a bit of a turnoff. So you add that, the dumbing down of Christianity. If you add the the prosperity gospel, and you add all of that, you add some of this predatory behavior, and look, there's other things. Look, a lot of gay people that are gay or transgender, they've experienced a lot of mistreatment from their family. Their parents have turned their back on them, or have denounced them because of that, and there's a lot of people who there's a lot of churches that are really into promoting child abuse, right, and spare the rod and all of that. There's a lot of people who religion will always be associated with domestic violence and with corporal punishment. There's a lot of people there's a lot of women who feel like religion in the church, encourages them to be submissive and doesn't, give them a feeling of being an empowered woman. So there's a lot of grievances people have with religion. And I will say one thing is that I noticed that a couple, around the time Trump got elected, the memo went out. And I don't know if people noticed this, but it was in the Wall Street Journal, it was in the New York Times, it was everywhere. It was in the Economist magazine. All the mainstream publications announced that left-wing Christianity was on the march. Liberal churches are big. Oh, they're big. There's liberal churches starting all over this country. That didn't happen. They wanted it to happen, right? Hillary Clinton announced she was becoming a pastor. She was going to become a Methodist minister, and oh boy, yeah, and it was just this memo went out. Oh, there's churches everywhere where young people are joining churches and going to Black Lives Matter rallies and protesting Trump. Liberal churches are happening. No, it didn't. Didn't happen. They wanted it to happen. They tried. They really tried to make it happen. A lot of foundation money. I'm sure a lot of these churches that started in Brooklyn got a lot of funding to start out, and they really tried to build like hipster liberal activist church, but it didn't work. It didn't work because, and as somebody who went and directly observed some of that, I went and listened to some of these pastors and all of that. It all had a fake quality to it. It all had a very fake quality to it. It wasn't genuine, okay? I'm just being real. There is a religious left in the history of the United States. There is a real religious left in the United States. John Brown, that was a Christian. John Brown, the abolitionist, the freedom fighter, that was a Christian. That was religious left. They are not, you know, you think, you know, the Ford Foundation is going to pay for John Brown to have a church in Brooklyn? No. No. Right? There is a history of the religious left in the United States. There are pastors and priests and you know, folks who have, in the name of religion and motivated by their religious teachings, have done very heroic things. I believe in Minnesota, there was or is it Wisconsin or Minnesota, there was a pastor, Father Grappi, who marched to integrate neighborhoods, and he would lead, you know, crowds of white and black people to march for the right of black people to move into white neighborhoods, and mobs would assemble and throw bricks and rocks at this guy, and he marched against segregated neighborhoods in Minnesota and Wisconsin. That was a Christian, right? That's religious left. They are not gonna, you know, read about Latin America, for goodness sakes. The Sandinistas in Nicaragua, that's religious left. They're never gonna fund that stuff. They're never gonna fund that stuff, right? And that a lot of the religious left, they got funding right after Trump got elected. And it was all over the news that this stuff was, it was hot, it was happening. It was fake as hell. It was fake as hell, and it didn't catch on. You know, it didn't catch on, right? Real religious left, you would have to find people who are fanatical, who really believe in this stuff, right? You'd have to find the American Khomeini, right? You'd have to find, you know, the American Ortega, right? You'd have to find, you know, the American Hugo Chavez, right? And they're not going to put, you know, they're not going to have that, right? Okay, Ahmadinejad wrote to Putin. All right, you know, they're not going to have that. So yeah, you know, religion is about passion. Religion is about spirituality. It's about big emotions. It's about connections to something bigger than yourself. You know, and you know, the religious right in the United States has become so phony and watered down and so obviously in service of neoconservatism and libertarian economics. And, you know, and the religious left in the United States lacks any oomph and passion and is just kind of, you know, and yeah, both of those entities have kind of failed. Religion is about passion. Religion is about fervor. It's about strong emotions and beliefs. It's about wanting to fight and die and give your life for something bigger than yourself, right? And the ruling class of the United States and the liberal order does not believe in that. So any institution that they prop up that's going to be religious is going to fail, because religion depends on fanaticism. Religion depends on high passion and emotion, that feeling of oneness that Sigmund Freud attacks in his book Civilization and Its Discontents. That is what religion depends on, right? It depends on that. And any religion that is going to be propped up by the liberal order in the United States is not going to have that. It's not going to have that. So there you go. All right. Is Bronx really the poorest county in the United States? I've heard many times since I've moved to New York City, I've been to many places where I've heard that. If I am wrong about that, I stand corrected. But my understanding, I've heard many different places that the Bronx is the poorest county in the United States. Perhaps that has changed since the pandemic or whatever, but that's always what I've heard, right? All right. January 6th, was it really the darkest day for our democracy? Geez, you know, there was the day when the British invaded the United States at the War of 1812, and they burned the White House to the ground. Remember that? You know, like, you know, the British, you know, invaded the United States and lit the White House on fire and burned it to the ground. I mean, that might have been a dark day. I'm just saying, you know. Oh, gee, you know, then there was this whole thing called the Civil War. You know, there was a Civil War where, like, you know, a bunch of states in the South took up arms against the federal government in the hopes of maintaining slavery, and like 500,000 people died, and it was this big bloodbath. You know, that might have been a dark day for democracy. Oh, geez, you know, there was COINTELPRO, where the government and the FBI had this whole program of suppressing left-wing activists and assassinating black revolutionary leaders. That might have been a dark day, you know. But no, you know, in order to not get canceled, we're all going to agree with what liberals are saying. The worst thing that ever happened in the history of the United States is when a bunch of dumb rednecks went inside Capitol Hill and farted in Nancy Pelosi's chair. That is the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of America. It is the worst thing that has ever happened. Never in America has anything worse than this ever happened, right? Nothing as bad as Buffalo Head running around in Congress looking like an idiot. Nothing like that has ever happened. Nothing that bad has ever happened in the history of America. Ever. And that's why you have to vote for the Democrats forever. Because if you don't vote for the Democrats, people are going to be farting in Nancy Pelosi's chair every day. It'll just get smelly. It'll be awful. All right, I'm being juvenile. I'm being childish here. I couldn't resist. But, I mean, yes, January 6th was awful. I don't approve of what Buffalo Head did. I don't approve of what, you know, the Proud Boys and those folks did. I don't think that Ashley Babbitt deserved to die, and I think that was not a justifiable homicide. You know, Ashley Babbitt, you know, if she was vandalizing property, if she was breaking the law, she should have been held accountable for that. But she didn't deserve an on the spot execution. She didn't have a gun. You know, they didn't have to kill her, right? The killing of Ashley Babbitt was not justified in any conceivable way. It was wrong. Right? It was wrong. We don't have the death penalty for walking into the Capitol in the United States. We don't have the death penalty for vandalism here. So, you know, they didn't have to kill Ashley Babbitt. And look, there are some facts. Look, a lot of what we've been told about January 6th, they're going to do an investigation. They're comparing to the 9/11 report, and I'll be curious to see what they say, but for example, we were told that this woman was trampled to death by the crowds. Well, now we find out she actually died from a heroin overdose. It was a drug overdose that actually killed her, wasn't being trampled to death. We were told that this police officer died. He died because the protesters hit him over the head with a fire extinguisher. Well, he was hit over the head with a fire extinguisher. That's definitely illegal, but, you know, he actually died from a stroke. So, you know, maybe that contributed to the stroke, but that's not what killed him. Ashley Babbitt was shot. She didn't have to die. There are things about the events that are not quite adding up. One thing that I find to be very odd, very, very odd, is that 2 police officers committed suicide shortly afterwards. You know, I mean, they did. I don't think they didn't kill themselves. I'm sure they did, right? These 2 Capitol police officers killed themselves. That happened. Why, though? I mean, cops mix it up with protesters all the time. All the time. I mean, during the Black Lives Matter protests, there were cops, tear gassing people, beating people up. I was at Occupy Wall Street. Cops injured people and put them in the hospital. And, cops mixing it up with protesters, is not like, it's not something that doesn't happen very often, especially in Washington, D.C. All kinds of protests happen in Washington, D.C. Cops mixing it up with protesters in Washington, D.C. and getting rough and clubbing them and fighting them and, that happens all the time. So I find it a little odd that 2 police officers committed suicide right after January 6th. And we are being told by the media that suicide was directly caused by January 6th. Maybe I'm missing something here. And look, folks, this is the thing. I'm telling you that I have questions, right? I have questions. That's all I've got, right? I have questions about it. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Why? I want to know details. Why did these 2 police officers, after January 6th, kill themselves? I mean, is it really that they were just so shaken up by the events on January 6th that they committed suicide? It's possible, okay? It's very possible. And you know what it could have been, honestly? It could have been that they're used to mixing it up and beating up left-wing protesters, and they feel good about themselves. They're like, yeah, I beat up a commie today. But maybe it's more traumatic for police officers who are themselves conservatives and right-wing to beat up right-wingers. Is that what happened? I don't know, okay? I just find I have questions. I mean, we're being told that 2 police officers committed suicide after the January 6th events, and they clearly did. I mean, I don't deny that they committed suicide, but what about January 6th caused them to kill themselves? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what about the January 6th protests caused these police officers to kill themselves? Tell me. Tell me. I'm open to learning about it. Look, I don't condone January 6th. And let me just say this about January 6th, okay? January 6th, Vosh should have been like the leader of the January 6th riots. He should have been, right? Because the Falun Gong people were there, who he supports and hates China. You know, the Hong Kong protesters who wave Pepe the Frog and Trump flags, who he supports, who hate China, they were there. The anti-Iran people, the Shah supporters, they were there. The Miami Cubans and the Gusanos, they were all there. The anti-North Korea, the Korean Moonies, they were there. All these foreign policy constituencies that all the CIA fake left hate were all there in big numbers, right? Netanyahu supporters were there with big Israeli flags. January 6th was not an anti-imperialist rally. Let me repeat myself. January 6th was not an anti-imperialist rally in any conceivable way. It was a rally of every single one of these foreign policy special interest groups, of these counter gangs, these little cults that the United States has built up around the world. Likudnik Zionists, Shah Pahlavius, Shah supporters, and Mujahideen Khalq from Iran, Miami Cubans, the Moonies, the Falun Gong, Epoch Times people, the anti-China fanatics, the Hong Kong protesters, all the people that BreadTube supports around the world were all there for Trump. The only people that BreadTube gets mad about. Never do you hear BreadTube complain about all the Likudniks that were at that rally. Never do you hear BreadTube complain about all the Falun Gong and anti-China people at the rally. Never did BreadTube complain about the Gusano Cubans that were at the rally. Oh no, BreadTube, they only bring up the white Americans with Confederate flags. Now, the Confederate flag is a racist symbol. I am against the Confederate flag. I'm against any attempt to build nostalgia for the abomination that was the Confederacy. But why? Why does BreadTube only single out white working class people with racist views and not the whole fascist, right-wing, pro-imperialist gathering? Why is that? Why is that? Because at the end of the day, BreadTube thinks that American workers are all the enemy, right? They think American workers, their lives are too good. They have too much stuff. We need to drop their living standards, degrade the economy. They've all got their white privilege. We need to drive their living standards down. We need to reduce their level of consumption. We need them to get them to understand that they're not entitled to decent wages and health care and things like that. They're not entitled to that, right? They're dirty, rotten Euro settlers, and they exploited that from people in the third world, and they need to be poorer, and that they should have their life should be worse, and that they should, they wage this this identity politics war against Middle America. Middle America is the enemy as far as BreadTube is concerned, and anyone who fights for average working people in the United States. If you say the working class of the United States has been screwed by NAFTA and all that, Nazi, they call you a Nazi, right? Even though they're big fans of the Nazis in Ukraine, they're big fans of the Pepe the Frog, Trump supporter, flag-waving Hong Kong rioters. They're fans of all of these pro-imperialist constituencies, right? They're fans of all of them, right? But they have decided that anyone who sticks up for the American working class, and anyone who, God forbid, tries to build solidarity, anyone who says that, black and white, united fight against the low-wage police state, anyone who says that is a Nazi, because real politics is privilege politics, is wokeism, is this wokest, privilege politics, shame. They have decided that Middle America needs to be torn down, to fix the climate or whatever, to fix the climate and to, punish it for its white privilege. Middle America needs to be torn down. And that any populism, any attempt to build a mass movement of working people to fight for their rights is Nazi. That's what these people think. right? And you know, they don't just think about white workers. They hate Minister Farrakhan because he's building a mass movement of black people, right? You know, they hate the new Black Panther Party. They hate Gaddafi. They hate Putin. They hate the Chinese government. They hate Bolivarianism. Oh no, socialism is building a worker cooperative with your friends and degrowing everybody. That's what these people think. And you know, January 6th was not an anti-imperialist rally by any means, but the only people that they've bothered to attack are the people that represent Middle America. BreadTube is mobilizing. They don't think the enemy is capitalism. They think the enemy is Middle America. Middle America doesn't make the right consumer choices. Middle America isn't woke enough. They haven't agreed to, they haven't gone along with the woke makeover. They still, read the Bible in their churches. They haven't replaced the Bible with the virtue of selfishness by Ayn Rand or some postmodern text that it says there is no truth, right? Middle America still believes in truth. They still, they want a better life for their kids, God forbid. They haven't woken up that there is no truth, that we all need to degrow. The BreadTube cult, Middle America is their enemy. And that's why they hate Trump. That's why they hate Trump. Because, they don't hate Trump because he attacked Iran. They hate Iran. Right? I don't like Trump. I hate Trump because he killed Qasem Soleimani. These people hate Qasem Soleimani. They don't hate Trump because Donald Trump deregulated and privatized things. That's what they want, right? Degrowth, right? Drove everyone's wages down. Great. They're all about that. They hate Trump because Trump rallied Middle America and he didn't go along with the overall wokest pro-imperialist narrative. And that's what these people are doing. They hate Middle America, and they're waging a culture war against Middle America. And that's not socialism. Socialism is about working people coming together and fighting for a new society where the banks and the factories and the major centers of economic power are forced to serve public good and not the profits of a few. Socialism is a whole new society where imperialism is dismantled and countries trade with each other on the basis of win-win cooperation, where central planning and rational human reason dictates production, not the anarchy and chaos of the market, and growth is unlimited, and we can move toward the stateless, classless world of vast material abundance called communism. That's what socialism is. Socialism has nothing to do with tearing down Middle America in a woke makeover of empire. It has nothing to do with that. So, the BreadTube universe, anyway. All right. Fundamentalism versus spirituality. I think we covered that. We covered that in the religious thing. And I have not read Tolstoy, so I can't answer that. All right. Far-right regime in the USA. How could it stave off a crisis? Well, okay, so, I have long maintained, that's a weird question, but I have long maintained that, okay, when it comes to fascism, let me take a drink of water. When it comes to fascism, among communists, there are generally three definitions of fascism, right? You get the standard definition of fascism, which is fascism is just right-wing authoritarianism. As, Republicans get more right-wing and more authoritarian, they're becoming fascist. That's your standard definition. Then you have the Trotskyite definition. Trotskyites say fascism is a middle-class movement that is against both big capital and against the working class, and it's like a mobilization. It's a violent middle-class movement that gets picked up by the capitalists, in a time of crisis. And then you have this weird ultra-left definition, where people say fascism, if someone sounds like a socialist or sounds like a communist, but they're not, they're a fascist. Well, all three of those definitions have a grain of truth in them, but they are all fundamentally wrong, right? Yes, fascism is right-wing authoritarianism. Yes, fascism is often a middle-class movement that opposes both big capital and the working class movement. And yes, it does get hijacked by the ruling class to serve their ends. That's true. Yes, fascists often sound like socialists and use kind of populist rhetoric, but, have a very different agenda. That's true. But none of that really gets to the essence of what fascism actually is. Fascism is an attempt to save capitalism by mobilizing society for destruction and violence. That's basically what it is. It is the ruling class It's a section of the ruling class, a faction of the ruling class seizing control of the government and mobilizing mass violence and terror and destruction, driving living standards down in the hopes of staving off an economic crisis. That's what fascism really is. It's trying to stop a capitalist crisis with mass destruction, right? It's Bonapartism. It's one faction of the ruling class seizing control of the government and then mobilizing society to tear things down and to engage in mass violence and destruction in order to stop an economic crisis, right? Great example, Adolf Hitler takes power in Germany, breaks the labor unions, builds a network of concentration camps, throws all the communists and socialists and leftists into the concentration camps, starts military spending up again, and rebuilds the German economy by breaking the labor movement, by putting half the country in prison camps and the other half in military uniforms, right? With mass destruction, with death economy, Hitler was able to jumpstart the German economy, right? Italy under Mussolini, similar story, right? March on Rome, Italy comes in there, crushes the labor movement. Mussolini comes in with his March on Rome, he crushes the labor movement. He mobilizes society into this gleeful fit of violence and terror, right? One thing that Mussolini loved to do, Mussolini particularly liked to torture people with castor oil. Have you ever heard of this? That was one thing that the fascist government of Italy loved to do, was to torture people with castor oil. Castor oil is a natural, what do you call that? It's a natural laxative. So, someone gets strapped down into a chair and force-fed a natural laxative and then proceeds to shit themselves, right, until they're, dehydrated. That it was this kind of gleeful celebration of harming other people, getting society into this cruel, sadistic mode where they enjoy punishing and brutalizing people and just beating down, terrorizing society, launching new wars, all in the hope of stabilizing a capitalist society with violence and by driving the wages and living conditions of one section of the working class down, right? Fascism is about trying to drive down living conditions and creating an atmosphere of violence and destruction in the hopes of saving capitalism. That's what fascism actually is. A far-right regime in the United States, hypothetically a fascist regime in the United States, the person is asking, could they stabilize U.S. society with this? Hypothetically, yes. When Trump came into office, I was worried that he might actually do something like this. It occurred to me that the wall might turn into a jobs program, right? Many people that looked at Donald Trump and his agenda, right, where he said he was going to deport, at least 2 million or 2 million, I think there's at least 2 million undocumented workers in the United States. It's a big number of people. He was going to deport all of them. And many people looked on and they said, there's no way you could deport 2 million people without a mobilization of the country that would be massive. And they were right about that, right? That you couldn't mobilize, the removal of, that many million. I think it's way more than 2 million undocumented workers in the United States. You couldn't mobilize the immediate removal of that many people in the United States without mobilizing all of society. And a lot of people said, so he's just wrong. Well, no, I think that in reality, I think, if Donald Trump wanted to do that, oh boy. Thank you, old gringo. If Donald Trump wanted to do that, right? I mean, if Donald Trump really wanted to mobilize, right? I mean, if he created some special eviction force and hired millions of people to be, ICE people, and ICE expanded to 25 times what it is now. If the wall on the border became a jobs program and hired people, if the prison industrial complex expanded rapidly and they started jailing dissidents and breaking the labor movement and putting people, labor union leaders in prison, and breaking the labor unions and driving wages down that way. And yes, you could stabilize the economy in the United States the way Hitler did with mass repression, right? If we started having, the prison system, the prison industrial complex got amped up, to 5 or 6 times what it is now. If you mobilized a mass deportations, if the wall became a jobs program, if building prison camps became a jobs program, if a new war started and we were having World War III, and the military spending ratcheted up, yeah, you could stabilize the U.S. economy with fascism. You could do it, and it would be a nightmare. And I really hope that doesn't happen. And if that were to happen, then we're screwed, right? Because that's how fascist regimes stay in power, right? The way the South Korean Park regime, the fascist regime in South Korea of Park, was able to stabilize itself was with this, right? If you're going to build a fascist regime, you have to be able to deliver an economic goods. You have to be able to make the economy stable with your fascism. If you don't do that, if there's not a chunk of society that are benefiting from your fascism, you can't do it, right? There you go. Anti-Russian mainstream media actually believes Putin is a communist. All right. Media thinks Putin is communist. All right. Thank you for that. All righty. Dimitrov says that fascism is the open terroristic dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital, says Space Communist. You are correct, Space Communist, and I quote that in the book on BreadTube. The chapter on fascism, I quote from R. Palm Dutt. The best book on fascism I ever read was by R. Palm Dutt, Fascism and Social Revolution. But there's also the writings of Georgy Dimitrov, the leader of the Communist International, who also had very good analysis of fascism. All right, enough about that. All righty. Did Lenin disband the Soviets? No. No. Okay, so during the Bolshevik Revolution, right, there were these entities created called Soviets or councils. It just means councils. I mean, these bodies that were formed during the Russian Revolution that were like the basis of the revolution on a local level. And the government that emerged was the Soviet government. It was those councils, those bodies formed as part of the revolutionary process becoming the government. That's where the Soviet Union came from. Now, originally, there were 3 political parties, not just one, that recognized the Soviet government. The main one was the Bolsheviks, but there was also the left Menshevik Party, not the majority of the Mensheviks, but the left Menshevik Party. The left Menshevik Party, best anti-imperialist medium. Left Menshevik Party. There was also the left Socialist Revolutionary Party, and all 3 of those parties recognized the Soviet Constitution. However, there was a state of siege. 15 countries invaded the Soviet Union. The country was being put down. The country was being attacked. So, as a result of the state of siege that took hold in the Soviet Union, and as a result of the state of siege that took place in the Soviet Union, they had to get more rigid and authoritarian. And part of that was centralizing authority. If you're going to fight a war, you need a centralized government. So the local councils, the local Soviets and neighborhoods, were subordinated to a central government. And there was a group of people who didn't want that. There was what was called the workers' opposition inside the Bolshevik Party, and then there was the Kronstadt uprising. And the slogan of those folks was Soviets without communists. You can Google this. Soviets without communists. Meaning that they did not want the local workers' councils to be subordinated to the central government. They didn't want a central communist party directing the workers' councils. Soviets without communists. And in Kronstadt, they took up arms against the Soviet government, and they were put down, right? And that's what you're referring to. And generally, the way anarchists understand that, they say Lenin dissolved the Soviets. Well, I mean, up until the fall of the Soviet Union, there were Soviets. Soviets were just the councils that were the basis of the Soviet state, right? And every socialist government around the world has something like this. In Cuba, they have the committees to defend the revolution. In Venezuela, they have Bolivarian circles, and even in Iran, which is not nominally a socialist country, it's an anti-imperialist country, but they reject both capitalism and socialism. They call it not capitalism, but Islam. They have these things called Basij, which are mobilized oppressed, and they're besieged councils, mobilized oppressed councils that are in every neighborhood. Gaddafi had the popular assemblies, right? And that the basis of any anti-imperialist state is community organizations, local community groups. You go to China, right? The Chinese Communist Party, they've got somebody in every building. They in the lead up to the revolution, they had the peasant associations, the workers associations, some kind of community base, some kind of community organization, some kind of local entity that carries out the goals of the revolution on a community local level. That's every socialist society has those. So Lenin did not disband those. That Lenin did want them to be coordinated and centralized, right? And that the Kronstadt sailors, who said, Soviets without communists, they were put down as they revolted against the Soviet government. Now, someone else is asking, what about councils as preliminary to socialism in the United States? And actually, that's a very good idea. Folks, I've told many times about when I was in Cleveland. When I was an activist in Cleveland, I was involved in anti-war protests. I was involved in protests against police brutality. There was an organization that existed on the east side of Cleveland, and it was called Black on Black Crime Incorporated. And it was a black nationalist organization led by Art McCoy. Art McCoy was the owner of the Superfly barbershop in East Cleveland, and he was a well-known community activist, a black nationalist. And he had this group called Black on Black Crime Incorporated. And they met every Wednesday night, and there would be 70 people at their meetings. There'd be 100 people at their meetings. And at their meetings, they would talk about the housing costs and rent. They would talk about the speed light cameras and the traffic cameras and the economic toll that played on the community. They would talk about hospitals closing. They would talk about police brutality. They often, Black on Black Crime Incorporated would negotiate truces between gangs. When gangs were fighting each other in the area, they would go and negotiate a truce to stop the gang war and stop the killing in the neighborhood. Black on Black Crime Incorporated was a community assembly that fought for the interests of the black community. I marched with them against the closing of hospitals. I went to court many times with police brutality victims who they were supporting. That organization was basically what a Soviet is supposed to be, right? It's a center of the community that is leading struggles of the working people in that community. What I saw with Black on Black Crime Incorporated, that is what communist parties are and communist groups are in most of the world, right? If you go to Africa, if you go to Latin America, if you go to Asia, you go to countries where they have functioning communist parties, that's what they are. They are centers of the community that deal with things on a local level and mobilize people, and they are guided by an ideology. They teach and are guided by an ideology, but they are heavily involved in local community struggles. And any revolution in the United States that is going to be successful, any revolution anywhere, has to develop this kind of entity, organizations that function on a local level with ideology, but carrying out the goals of the revolution, right? And serving the community in which they operate, right? And so, someone asks about that. Yes, right? I mean, if we had a real communist party in the United States, during the 1930s, the Communist Party USA was like this, with their unemployment councils and their labor associations and their trade union educational league and stuff. This is what they did, right? The Black Panthers with their free breakfast program and their survival pending revolution program. This is what they did. This is what real revolutionaries do. They organize in communities. They are fighters for the people in the community. They are at the center of every issue in the community, but they bring with them to everything ideology, right? And what Black on Black Crime Incorporated in Cleveland was doing is what, if we had a functional communist left in the United States, that's what they would be doing, right? We don't have that. We don't have a functional communist left in the United States. But if we did, it would look a lot like what Black on Black Crime Incorporated was in Cleveland. And that is why I have absolute admiration for black nationalism. Black nationalism is probably one of the most revolutionary movements in the United States right now. Black nationalists tend to be anti-imperialist. They tend to sympathize with China, with Russia, with Iran. They tend to see American capitalism and imperialism as their enemy. They tend to, even though they're not communists usually, they're usually, either Muslim or just in black nationalist in orientation. They tend to admire Fidel Castro. They tend to admire Che Guevara. They tend to have a sympathetic view of communists because they fought imperialism. Black nationalism is one of the most revolutionary movements in the United States. It is the most revolutionary movement in a lot of ways. Minister Farrakhan, he mobilized people, not only to fight against drugs in the black community, not only to organize gang truces and all that, but also, he had the Millions March in Harlem, this huge rally to support Gaddafi, right? Minister Farrakhan speaks to audiences of thousands of people, exposing how the U.S.-Iraq war was criminal. The black nationalist movement in the United States is an anti-imperialist revolutionary movement among the working class. It's just among the black working class. And that's why I admire it. And I'm sorry, if you want to tell me they're not real communists, I never said they were real communists, but if you're this is the essence of what you need to understand. Real communism, real socialism in our time is anti-imperialism. Capitalism in our time is imperialism. Capitalism is not a pencil factory. Capitalism is the rule of the world by huge multinational corporations. Imperialism is capitalism in its monopoly stage. Huge trusts and cartels and syndicates, Western banks and corporations dominating the world, holding back economic development, keeping the world poor so that they can stay rich. Capitalism is a global system of monopoly monopoly, right? It's monopoly capitalism. It's the rule of the world by huge multinational banks and corporations. That is what capitalism is in our time. And if you're not against that, if you're not fighting the imperialists, if you're not an anti-imperialist, you're not really an anti-capitalist. You can sit there and wank all day about how you want the pencil factory to be a cooperative, and yeah, I get that. But if you're not anti-imperialist, you're not anti-capitalist. Let me repeat myself. If you're not anti-imperialist, you're not anti-capitalist. And if you're really anti-imperialist, that means that you admire people who are anti-imperialist who don't agree with you. That means that you admire people like the Islamic Republic of Iran, who have a different perspective, but they are anti-imperialist, right? It means you admire countries like Russia, not Marxist, but they are anti-imperialist. It means you admire people like Minister Farrakhan and the Black Nationalist Movement. They are not Marxist, but they are definitely anti-imperialist, right? And if you understand that imperialism is what you're against as a socialist and as a revolutionary, then anybody in the world that is anti-imperialist, you want to talk to them, and you want to have a relationship with them, and you want to have dialogue with them, and you want to find common ground with them, because you know who the enemy is. Furthermore, anybody who's pro-imperialist, right? Now, you obviously don't want to just give them a middle finger. You want to engage with them. But if somebody's pro-imperialist, they ain't your comrade. If somebody's pro-imperialist, they are not your comrade. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, they can talk socialism all day. They can talk about how woke they are. They can be, pro-trans and pro-LGBT, and they can be this and that. But if they are pro-imperialist, they're not on the same side as you. And your job is not to just be chummy with them. Your job is to win them to be anti-imperialist. That means, talking to them doesn't mean you just shout at them and you're hostile to them. It means you engage with them in a winning way to be anti-imperialist. Imperialism is the cutting edge. Imperialism is not a policy. Imperialism is a system. It is a global system of monopoly capitalism. And to be anti-imperialist in our time is to be a socialist. And that is the cutting edge. And if you don't get this, you don't get it. All right. Why has there not been a resurgence of major black Marxist organization in the U.S. since the downfall of the Panthers? All right. Okay. All right. All righty. Hey, Caleb, I have to go. Keep up the great work. Well, great, David. Glad you're here. You do great work as well. Keep up the great sessions you're doing with Helen on the manual. So there you go. No new black Marxist since Panthers. All righty. Have any examples of explaining Marxist economics and imperialism in layman's terms? Marxist economics imperialism in layman's terms. Alrighty. Okay. Enver Hoxha. Enver Hoxha was the leader of Albania, and, he built a lot of bunkers all over Albania, and people like to joke about that. But, Albania was originally aligned with the Soviet Union. It was a socialist country. After the Sino-Soviet split, when China broke with the Soviet Union, they were the only other country in the world that was 100% on China's side against the Soviet Union. Then, when Deng Xiaoping came to power, Albania denounced China and maintained that they were the only truly communist country in the world. All the other countries were revisionist. Interestingly enough, Albania was probably the most egalitarian country in the world at that point. It only had 4 wages. There were only 4 possible wages you could get. You either got wage number 1, wage number 2, wage number 3, or wage number 4, right? So it was very egalitarian. Albania, they did, what's interesting is most socialist countries were officially, they had no state religion, right? There was separation of church and state. Now, the Communist Party, did propagate atheism usually, but officially they had no official religion. Albania was the only socialist country that actually made atheism the state religion. It's the only country in the world where atheism is actually the state religion. All the other socialist countries officially have no state religion. They have a secular government. Albania, they went all out, and they had they did have, an official atheism on the part of the government. Albania is yet another tragedy of the Cold War, because you cannot build an egalitarian society on the basis of scarcity. Right? They tried, right? They tried. Very poor country in Eastern Europe, and they tried to say all the other socialist countries, none of them are anywhere near as egalitarian as we are. Well, if you read Critique of the Goethe Program by Karl Marx, he makes overwhelmingly and abundantly clear that egalitarianism is based on material abundance. The central planning of socialism leads to more abundance being created, and it is that abundance that lays the basis for breaking down inequality. Inequality doesn't vanish. You cannot build an egalitarian society on the basis of scarcity. Breaking down inequality requires vast material abundance. Imperialism is a continuity of primitive capital on a global scale. Agree or comment? Continuity of primitive capital on a global scale. All right, wrote it down. All right, and that's the tragedy, right? You can try to be egalitarian, but inequality is based on scarcity, and abundance is the cure, and only socialism can create that abundance. All right, Marxist ethics. Right. Well, this is interesting, right? Marxist ethics, and I'm not a philosophy guy generally. I understand dialectical materialism, and I understand Hegel a little bit, but I guess when you want to talk about ethics, right? Generally, there's a phrase that gets used, that gets thrown at communists and leftists all the time. I'm sure you've heard this, you've encountered this. People say, well, Marxists, communists, and leftists are bad because they say, quote, the ends justifies the means. They say that the ends justifies the means. Well, everybody says that some ends justify some means. The question is, which ends justify which means, right? Now, if I'm trying to think, if I wanted a candy bar and you had it, if my ends was to get the candy bar, I could kill you and take the candy bar. Now, that would not be moral. Why? Because the ends of me getting a candy bar do not justify the means of me killing you, right? And so that would be immoral. As an ethical, moral actor, I would determine that no, the ends of me getting a candy bar do not justify the means of me killing you, right? This is what being a moral actor is, right? We all go through life determining what ends justify what means, right? That's what we do. So this notion that communists think the ends justifies the means, We all think that in some cases, and thank you, Andre, in some cases the ends justify the means, and in other cases they don't. That's what being a moral logician is you think, you go through life determining what ends justify what means. So when people are like, communists think the ends justify the means, think about what you're saying. This is not a logical statement. It's not a logical thing that they're saying. This is just like an illogical thing they repeat. Communists think the ends justify the means. Well, some ends justify some means, and figuring that out is part of what it means to be a human being. Okay? And that phrase, the ends justify the means, actually comes from the Spanish Inquisition, right? So, back in this time of the Spanish Inquisition, right, they were having the Protestant Reformation in Germany and France and other places. There was something called the Protestant Reformation. And during the Protestant Reformation, right, Spain was a stronghold of the Catholic Church and a stronghold of feudalism. And so they had the Inquisition, where they were burning people at the stake and doing everything to make sure that they didn't have any of that Protestant Reformation stuff in Spain. And so the Pope assembled the Jesuits, and he said to them, I want you to determine by what means we can crush the Protestant Reformation. And they said, what means would be okay? And they said any means would justify the ends of crushing the Protestant Reformation. The end of crushing the Protestant Reformation would be justified by any means, right? By any means, this end would be achieved. So the Jesuits went away, and then the Jesuits came back, and they said, okay, we have determined the best way, the most effective way to crush the Protestant Reformation. And they said, all right, go ahead. And they said, completely change the Roman Catholic Church to adjust, to accommodate all of their grievances. And then all these people that are doing the Protestant Reformation, they won't have anything to be mad about. And so then there won't be any Protestant Reformation. And of course, the Pope said, get out of here. Come on. And that shows that if you say that the ends justify the means, that any means can justify an end, eventually you cancel yourself out. Right? Eventually you're going to cancel yourself out because you're going to come up with a means that eventually cancels out the ends, right? That yes, right? By having a Reformation in the Catholic Church, they could cancel out the Protestant Reformation. That's true, right? And this is the kind of the silliness of this logic. Look, communists do have morals. They do have goals that they are trying to achieve. And yes, communists have morals, communists have ethics, and all of that. We all do. Communists are just a little bit more rational about it, right? I would argue. At one point in my life, I argued that there were three competing moralities in America. And I'm not sure I would put it this way, but this was when I was in college. I used to tell people that there are three competing moral systems in America. The first moral system is the conservative and religious moral system, which says, do it because you're told, right? And that is, we got that from the evangelicals. You argue with the evangelicals, they say, all laws come from the Bible. And you say, no, they don't. And they say, yes, they do. All laws come from the Bible. And I say, no, they don't. No, they don't. Well, why don't you kill me now? And I'd say, because of this thing we have called a social contract, that I don't want you to kill me. And so, I have this contract with society. No, it all comes from the Bible. That right and wrong, their moral reasoning is based on somebody told them. A higher power, authority figure told them. That is the moral system of feudalism. Right? That's the way people in feudal society think. Do as you are told. Do as the higher institution tells you. Right? Do as your noble tells you, because your noble is propped up by the king is propped up by God. Morality based on obedience. That is feudal morality. But then we have this other morality that has emerged, which is the morality of capitalism, which is selfishness. The virtue of selfishness, might makes right? That rational self-interest, people working for their own interest, right? People working in their own interest, people wanting what is best for themselves only, will lead to the greatest prosperity. And this is Ayn Rand. And this is, Anton LaVey, and this is Milton Friedman, and this is Friedrich von Hayek. And the idea is if I am just a selfish person, I will enter contracts with other people that'll be mutually beneficial, and I will go out and start a business and make lots of money. And that if I am just a purely selfish person, if I work only in my self-interest, eventually optimal good will happen for society, and that is the way that that is the ethical system. And that's the morality of capitalism. And you can see that a little bit in the Protestant Reformation, right? When people talk about the Protestant work ethic, I don't know if people are familiar with the Protestant work ethic, right? But it's the idea that, if you are a good person, God will reward you with lots of riches and wealth. So therefore, one should work very, very hard to get lots of money, because that'll mean God is rewarding you with the wealth, and that the Protestant work ethic, and that this notion that if you have lots of wealth and lots of money, that means you are good because God is rewarding you. And this is, you find it there, you find it in Ayn Rand, you find it in, LaVey Satanism. This is the morality of capitalism, that through our own selfishness, society benefits. Right? Morality is based on selfishness, right? I argued at one point that there is a third higher morality, which is the morality of putting the interests of other people above yourself, living for the sake of others, and having a vision of improving the world around you, becoming a selfless person who loves their neighbor as themselves, lives for the sake of others, and has a vision for improving the world around them. And that this morality of Jesus, this morality of Buddha, this morality of Muhammad, this morality of Marx and Lenin and Che Guevara and Ho Chi Minh, that this morality, this third morality, is the communist morality, is the morality of communism, is the morality of the higher stage of socialism leading to communism, is that third moral system. And that, I would argue, I think that there's a little bit of truth in what I'm arguing here, that third ethical and moral system that I'm listing, that's not simply based on obedience, that's not a morality of selfishness, but is instead, aspiring to be a human who lives for the sake of others. That third morality, is what communists are striving for. And I hope that answers your question, Chaya. That's how I see things, at least, right? That may not be, exactly dialectical materialist, but that's my personal viewpoint, is those three competing moral systems that exist in our world today. And that's where I line up. All right. Is the term middle class propaganda? In a lot of ways it is, yes. Technically, Marxism sees class in terms of relationship to the means of production, right? Those who work and sell their labor in the means of production are capitalists. Those who own banks and factories and means of production are capitalists, right? The workers and the capitalists are two different classes. Now, middle class in Marxian terminology refers to the petty bourgeoisie, right? The small business owners, the shopkeepers, right? The professionals, right? The self-employed professionals. Those are the middle class, right? That is the argument, right? That's the Marxian analysis. In the United States, the way people think of class is they think of class in terms of income level, right? That there are people that are rich, there are people that are poor, and the rest of us are the middle class. And they've done polls where 95% of America thinks they're in the middle class. You can be very, very wealthy and you still think you're in the middle class. You can be very, very poor and you still think you're in the middle class. Every American thinks they're middle class, right? This is part of the American mindset and delusion. We think of wealth in terms of income level, and because there is such a big gap between rich and poor, every rich person in the United States can think of somebody who's richer than them, right? You might be a millionaire, but you ain't Jeff Bezos, so you're middle class. And everyone in the United States can think of somebody who's poorer than them, Somebody might be in the lowest income level, live in the tiniest little home and be, struggling to feed themselves. But, they'll say, look, I at least have my tiny little home of my own, and there's undocumented workers who live 14 people to a home and don't need any better. There's always somebody poorer than you in the United States. There's always somebody richer than you in the United States. So everyone in the United States thinks they're part of the big soft middle, the middle class. And, our job as Marxists is to reorient the understanding that people have about what class means and say class is defined by relationship to the means of production, not by income level. All right, the UN and imperialism. Well, look, the UN was created after World War II. The UN Security Council is the countries that won World War II. One of those countries was the Soviet Union. Another one of those countries was China. China, the People's Republic, was not represented on the UN Security Council until the 80s, I believe. Until then, they had, the island of Taiwan, the Republic of China, representing China on the Security Council. But yeah, the UN, a lot of the NGO work that the UN does, a lot of that is very corrupt. There's a lot of corruption. All right. Current lumpen proletariat, lumpen in USA. A lot of the work it does is very corrupt. The United States often uses its influence within the UN in a negative way, but there are countries like Russia and China on the Security Council. There are, anti-imperialist countries in the UN who feel the UN is not set up properly. And there was a big effort by Hugo Chavez to change the UN and, call for changes in the UN structure. So there you go. All right. Now, someone said to me, the poor getting poorer through self-image and decadence. I mean, look, there was a store chain. I don't know if it's still around, but there was a store chain in Ohio for a while. And I actually don't want to say the name because if they're still around, they might sue me. But it was a store chain in Ohio that claimed to have lower prices than everyone else, and it didn't. It actually didn't have lower prices than everyone else. But it made a point of having the stores look dingier, right? They made a point of having the floors at the stores not be as clean, by making the store look more beat up. It maintained the illusion that its prices were lower when they weren't really that much lower than everybody else, right? And there was a lot of criticism of that from more liberal folks because they said shouldn't you be trying to build things up and, should we really be trying to make things look shittier than they actually are? Why are you making your store look shittier in order to appeal to people? There's ethical questions there, right? And people talk about the, there's a lot of criticism of bling bling and, the rap music culture. I'm not here to make that criticism. It's not for me to make, but people do criticize it. There's criticism of television programs like, Jerry Springer and and a lot of the TV programs that are directed at low income people, right? And there's, the shows that, Jerry Springer and, the talk shows and the shows that are directed at more low income folks. They talk about that, the notion that China is amoral and social Darwinist, right? People talk about that, right? And is there a culture, I think what the person is asking, is there a culture aimed at working class people, black and white? Is there a culture aimed at them that is in the process making poorer people poorer? And honestly, I don't know. I mean, there certainly are things in U.S. societies like that store that I mentioned earlier, like television programs. There are things that are marketed toward lower income people. That people argue, may contribute to their poverty, right? I mean, a friend of mine, anyone I've ever talked to who's been in the military says if you're in the military, it's country music and rap music, right? That's what it is. And people then, the people that make speculations about this say, well, what about, if you listen to the themes of country music, if you listen to the themes of rap music, does that contribute to poverty, right? And is this like a conspiracy from the ruling class that they make country music for poor white people and it's all about people drinking and committing suicide and shooting people and feeling miserable because their wife left them, and that they listen to this country music, and that makes working class people depressed, and it makes them superficial, and it makes them alcoholics, and so therefore, country music is a conspiracy. And people say similar things about rap music. I don't get into that mindset very much. Look, when people start dissing rap music, I always want to remind them about traditional Irish music. I always want to remind them about that because, People always say rap music, it's got these vulgar themes. Oh my God, and gangsters and robbery. Well, look, traditional Irish music, right? Norway and Sweden, right? Socialism, convince people in Norway, Sweden. How do we, people say, well, what about that? If you talk about rap music, look, there's a song called Whiskey in the Jar, right? If I was going over the Cork and Kerry Mountain. Listen to the lyrics to the Irish traditional song, Whiskey in the Jar, right? Like, that song is just as problematic as any gangster rap song, all right? And it's by Irish people, right? It's about a guy who robs a military captain at gunpoint, right? Then takes the money home to his girlfriend. His girlfriend then rats him out to the cops. The cops come to his house, and he tries to kill the cops and shoot them, but he can't shoot them because his girlfriend filled his gun up with water, and so his gun won't go off, and so he goes to jail, but he's hoping that his brother can bust him out of jail. That's how the song ends, and Metallica covered it. They changed the lyrics a whole bunch. I don't like the Metallica version at all. I like the traditional Irish music, but there you go. All right, Beatles, New Left. I like the traditional Irish version better, but there you go. That's what I like. If gangster rap is not okay, Whiskey in the Jar is not okay. Another song, traditional, it's not an Irish song. It's a traditional American song. Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight. What do you think the Buffalo gals were? Who do you think they were? They were just respectable women from Buffalo, New York. Is that what you think the Buffalo gals were? Really? They were just respectable women from Buffalo, New York, right? Listen to the lyrics to Buffalo Gals. When I was walking down the street, a lovely little thing I chanced to meet. We danced by the light of the moon. Come on, right? Buffalo Gals. It's a song about prostitution, all right? It's about streetwalkers and prostitution. It's very clearly about what that song is about, right? It's a cowboy going to the whorehouse. That's what it is, okay? So again, if you're going to bash rap music, you also got to bash, Buffalo Gals want you to come out tonight. Listen to some Johnny Cash lyrics. He shot a man just to see him die. Come on, man. These themes show up in working class music naturally, right? Working class people tend to lead lives in which there is crime, in which there is poverty, in which there is drugs and alcohol, in which there is violence. There's a lot of violence in working class people's lives. And so I don't think that country music and rap music is a conspiracy by the capitalists. I think that they may try to obscure the politics, right? And rap, when it started, in the 80s and 70s and 80s, rap was very political, right? Public Enemy and stuff like that was very political, and there may have been an attempt to obscure the politics of rap music, no doubt. But the themes that rap music gets just dissed for, right? About, bling bling and, violence and crime and disrespect of women and stuff. That's in all working class music. I'm sorry. Go listen to traditional Irish music. Go listen to folk music, right? These themes show up. This is working class life. All right. Alrighty. Ahmadinejad wrote to Putin. I haven't heard about that. I'll have to look that up. I have not heard about that, so I just can't comment on that. Media thinks Putin is a communist. Well, no, I've noticed this. So if you're a conservative in the United States, they want you to think Putin is a communist. If you're a liberal in the United States, they want you to think Putin is a fascist. Putin is neither of those things. Putin is not a communist. He rejects Marxism. Putin is not a fascist. He's not an admirer of Hitler. Is not an ethnic nationalist. Is not a supremacist of any race. He's not an advocate of Mussolini economics or the Mussolini. Putin is Putin, right? So I've been to Russia. Russia's not a fascist country. Right? It's not it's not run by the Communist Party. It's not a communist country. It's Russia. Okay? Yeah. And U.S. media, look, I've noticed that. That's what they do. And they do the same thing with China, right? if you're a liberal, you're supposed to think China is evil, an evil capitalist country. If you're a conservative, you're supposed to think it's an evil communist country. I mean, well, China, it's a socialist country, but they do have a big, market sector, and there you go. All right. All right, best anti-imperialist media. Dude, I work in anti-imperialist media. Look, I'll just say this, and I'll say this now. I don't talk about my job on here. So if there's somebody else who works at the company that I work at, and you super chat me about them, I'm not going to answer it, right? If you are going to ask me about other people who work in the same field that I work with, I'm not going to comment on it, right? If you're going to ask me who in the field that I work in is better than who, I'm not going to do that, okay? I am an anti-imperialist. I work in anti-imperialist media. Check out my stuff. There's a lot of great people I work with, and that's it. Like, don't send me bait, please. Please don't send me bait. All right. Sorry about that. All right. Why has there not been any new black Marxist groupings since the Black Panthers? Well, kind of, it's not just that there hasn't been a new black Marxist grouping. There hasn't been a new effective Marxist grouping in the United States since the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers, at the time you had, the civil rights movement was very, very big and was big and among the working class. And then after the initial stages of the civil rights movement, you had Stokely Carmichael, who invented the term Black Power, and you eventually had the rise of the Black Power movement. Out of that, you get the Black Panthers. At that point, there was a huge global Marxist-Leninist movement, and communism was very, very popular around the world. Black people, who see themselves as a colonized people in the United States, black nationalists, were oriented toward the main current of anti-imperialism, which was Marxism-Leninism. So there was a big Marxist-Leninist current among the black community, and that was the Black Panthers. There are still black Marxists in the United States, by plenty of them, right? You can talk about the New African Black Panther Party. You can talk about the African People's Socialist Party. There are many black nationalist groups that are influenced by Marxism, but they're not big like the Black Panthers were. And you'll also notice that there are a bunch of little tiny Marxist groups that are not black nationalist, like the Revolutionary Communist Party, like the Workers' World Party, like the Spartacist League, those folks are also small, right? That, Marxism as a current is much weaker than it once was. During the 1960s, it was like, it was a big chunk of the human race was living under explicitly Marxist-Leninist governments. Now, socialism is making a comeback. China is on the rise, Bolivarianism, etc. But Marxism-Leninism, Cold War Marxism-Leninism is not where it once was. And that's true internationally, and it's true domestically, too. So there you go. Right? And, right now in the United States, the conditions are forming struggle. So you do have a rise in black activism. So you have Black Lives Matter, which is, it's identity politics. It's not black Marxism. It's more of an ID poll current, but it's giving voice to real feelings among the masses. Black Lives Matter, right? That police state repression's got to be stopped, right? And on top of that, there are mass anti-capitalist sentiments in the United States. And so you do have Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, not revolutionaries, but they are giving voice to mass sentiments, mass anti-capitalist sentiments, right? Now, as the global situation changes and as the crisis escalates, you may get factions that, like among the black community that are explicitly black and Marxist. You may get a strong, explicitly, genuinely revolutionary socialist current as well. That is not where things are at currently. Right now in the United States, there are mass feelings of resentment and anger among the black community about their national oppression, and there are mass feelings of anti-capitalist sentiment among the broad working class. That is true, but right now, those feelings are mainly at the level of spontaneity. Right? We're not in a revolutionary crisis. So there you go. All right. Marxist Economics of Imperialism in Layman's Terms. Well, Expanding Empire by Vince Copeland is a very good pamphlet. You can read it on the internet. That's a very good pamphlet explaining the basis of imperialist economics. There's also a 10-page essay Vladimir Lenin wrote called Imperialism and the Split in Socialism. I would recommend that. But there are a number of very good works. I have written on this extensively. Read City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. Read We Are City Builders, the textbook. This is educating people about the nature of imperialism is what I do, right? That's what I'm all about. Michael Parenti, right? And his writing is very good on this front. So there are many, many good sources on that. All right. Is imperialism the continuity of primitive capital on a global scale? I wouldn't put it in those terms. I mean, it's about holding back development in in the impoverished and third world, right? It's in the colonized world, preventing economic development. That's the economics of imperialism. So there you go. All right, who are the lumpen in the USA? Well, I just reread the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, Karl Marx's very important pamphlet where he talks about the lumpen proletariat. And one thing he says about the lumpen proletariat is that they are not the people who do the work of the nation. They are working class people, but they engage in criminal activities. They scrape off of society, right? And, he has this long list of people that are in the Society of December 10th that Louis Bonaparte forms. And they're all, he talks about, organ grinders and, knife, criminals and pimps and prostitutes and the lumpen element are people who survive by criminal means, and they're not doing the productive labor of the country. They exist as kind of a, as kind of this layer of people that are criminalized and kind of grifting off of society. That's what the lumpen proletariat refers to. Right? That's what it refers to. The Crips and the Bloods, the Hells Angels, the Aryan Brotherhood, the MS-13, who else, drug dealers, yeah. So there you go. All right. Is China social Darwinist? No, they are not social Darwinist. My goodness, if they were social Darwinists, they'd be letting all the poor people in China remain in poverty, and so they wouldn't breed, right? Social Darwinism, the idea of social Darwinism is you shouldn't try to eradicate poverty, right? And China has done the opposite. They're constantly raising people up out of poverty. So, yeah, I mean, China is the opposite of social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is libertarianism. It's the idea you shouldn't help poor people because they're poor and then they'll have children, right? Social Darwinism is what, well, anyway, okay. All right. How do you convince people in Norway and Sweden and big countries with big welfare states to be socialists? How do you convince people of that? Well, I think you need to point out that these welfare states are not sustainable. With the crisis of mass migration, with the push of austerity and the capitalist crisis, this welfare state doesn't seem sustainable. There are bigger problems. The welfare state is not resolving the contradictions created by imperialism. It's not resolving the contradictions created by having an economy that operates on the basis of profits. There are bigger problems, right? That was a big hole. Michael Moore made this movie, Where to Invade Next, which I saw, and it was all about how European welfare states are good and we can learn from them. And it didn't point out that the wealth of the European welfare states comes from exploiting the third world, number one. It also didn't point out that, that at the same time, it was, the influx of migrants is breaking the solidarity among the population and, polarizing the population with these right-wing movements. And that is eroding the welfare state, right? And that, there's a feeling among the welfare state folks that, oh, these immigrants are coming here and they're getting all our benefits. And, and that now the solidarity among the population that created the welfare state is being broken. And one of the primary reasons we don't have a big welfare state in the United States is because of racism, right? These societies, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, are, at the time their welfare state was created, they were pretty much homogeneous, right? They were pretty much all the same ethnic group, right? They all looked like each other. And it was much harder to convince people that the poor people are all just a bunch of freeloading, welfare mother. It didn't work, right? Because they all look the same. In the United States, we don't all look the same. And by playing black and white against each other, by telling all the white people, oh, you don't want money for food stamps, do you? That just goes to people that look other than you, and they're a bunch of freeloaders. It's much easier for people to dehumanize people of another race. Right? And white racism is one of the biggest impediments to the class struggle and to the welfare state in the United States. There's a reason Ronald Reagan used the term welfare mother as a racist dog whistle. It works. The majority of women with children who get government assistance, the majority of welfare mothers are white. But by racializing the term, they were able to break that solidarity, right? And that the welfare states of the Nordic countries were based on the ruling class not being able to play that card. And now there's an influx of migrants from other countries, and they can play that card, right? And they've got Islamophobia going over there, and they've gotten all this. And so, the welfare states are going to be in jeopardy, I think, right? They can play that card now, right? That racism hurts all working people. Racism has hurt the labor movement historically. Racism is the enemy of all working class people in their struggle for justice. Are the Beatles part of the New Left? Yes, the Beatles. John Lennon was probably the most associated with the New Left of all of the Beatles. But yes, the Beatles, the way they pushed drug use, and they encouraged drug use. They gave press conferences talking about how they used LSD. They embraced the anti-Vietnam War movement. And yes, the Beatles were heavily, by having a rock band as popular as the Beatles were, and by having that rock band at the same time, be promoting kind of new left themes, that was definitely part of, the new left. And I might add that, so the Beatles, the Beatles concerts, right? I don't know if people know this, but the Beatles, they only toured the United States once, right? And in the early 60s, they toured the United States. And they went up and down the country. They went to Ohio, and they went through the South, Memphis, Tennessee, Alabama, places like that. And they had to end falling birth rates. They had to end their tour because they got so many threats, right? People shot at them. The Ku Klux Klan threatened them. They got so many threats. Middle America was up in arms, ready to destroy them. And the underlying reason was that going to a Beatles concert was a lot like going to a tent revival meeting, right? That if you went to a Pentecostal church service, right? If you went to a Pentecostal church service, it was a lot like, you'd get in that shaking and the crowd is moving and, people get into kind of this, look at the videos, go watch Hard Day's Night or, look at the audience and how the audience reacts to the Beatles, right? This is middle America. This is, TV is a very new thing and all that. And the Beatles very much figured out how to use rock music to get people hysterical, right? Elvis did it a little bit, but the Beatles did what Elvis did, and they amped it up times 10. And they got people into, the Beatlemania, the crowds of girls chasing people and all of that, right? It was, and it was a threat to middle America, because it was not religious, right? People used to get that way, and only it was about religion, right? And John Lennon gave, as Kinky points out, the interview where he said we're more popular than Jesus. And middle America felt attacked by the Beatles. They thought the Beatles were coming to destroy all that was good. They thought they were satanic. I've talked about this in different videos. And they weren't entirely wrong, honestly. I mean, they were wrong in thinking they were satanic. They weren't from Satan. They were wrong in thinking it was, evil and all that. But they were right in that this represented the more globalist wing of the ruling class, threatening the more traditionalist structures that middle America cherished, right? And that they did push a socially liberal agenda while they were very good at getting people all hysterical and, so yeah, the Beatles were a big part of the 1960s counterculture, new left phenomenon. They were definitely a big part of that. No question about it. No question about it. They were definitely a big part of what you can call the new left. No doubt about it. And that just kind of like the QAnon stuff now. QAnon is completely wrong, right? The world is not ruled by satanic pedophiles. It's ruled by a capitalist class that's ruthless. But if you don't have ideology, you don't have Marxism, it just seems like, okay, the world, you come up with a weird conspiracy theory story. Oh, it's ruled by satanic pedophiles. Well, okay, without Marxism, that's what you're going to think. Same goes for the Beatles, right? Again, the Beatles represented the more globalist wing of the ruling class that saw traditional cultures as kind of getting in the way of their desire to tear down the Soviet Union and foment unrest all over the world. Well, middle America, they don't have science, so they say, oh, it's devil music, it's satanic music that's, it's, again, these are attempts to, hijack the kind of primitive class-conscious feelings people have and give them expression in a way that's not a threat to the system, right? This is the oldest story. Why is the birth rate falling? Why do you think the birth rate is falling? Look at the global economy right now. We've just had a pandemic. 9 million people starved to death for lack of food, right? Yeah, why is the birth rate falling? Why would people not want to have revolution, or why would people not want to have children now? Think about it. Just think about that for a moment, right? I think we know why the birth rate is falling, right? People generally want their kids to have a better life than they had. When the economy is good, the birth rate rises. When the economy has a big meltdown because of a pandemic, when living standards are dropping, when people are dying of malnutrition, generally at that point, the birth rate decreases. Accessibility of birth control might have something to do with it as well. But there you go. All right, folks, that concludes tonight's show. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And look below, I have a link to the CPI conference that's happening. We're having a great CPI conference this Saturday. Tune in. It's called Cancel This Webinar. So tune in. It's going to be great. It's on cancel culture. So the link is down below. The danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, but revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.